I do get channeled information through, but if I can't confirm it with scientific stuff, I'm not going to put it out there. If people ask me, I'll say, well, look, that's what I'm told, but it's up to you whether you believe it or not. Everything that we tell you tonight, do not believe a single word that I tell you. Because if you believe what people tell you, you're a fool. But don't disbelieve what I tell you. Because if you do disbelieve, you're a cynic. Not a skeptic, a cynic. So have an open mind on the information. Some of the information will be scientific data, and it just stands on its own for what it is. Some of it is historical information that comes from the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Sumerians, who were documenting what was happening in their life. And some of it is information that's come through to me. It's like the glue that puts it all together. But you don't have to believe it. Some of the stuff that I'll tell you, you'll be aware of. Some of it you won't be aware of. Some of it will be a totally different perspective. And you are not obliged to take it on board. Some of what we tell you will absolutely scare the shit out of you, the implications of it. And if there is anyone here who walks out of the room without having experienced some point tonight where they don't go, oh shit, I would be very surprised. Because you have to go through it to understand it. But what I want you to trust more than anything else is what resonates within you. When you hear something, if it suddenly get that thing up the spine thing, that instantaneous reaction is your truth. You may then click into a whole lot of blocking and fear patterns after that, and that's okay too, and that's where Crystal will weave her magic to help you work through that stuff. Okay? So let's get a little bit into this. What are we talking about? I'm going to go through a little bit of metaphysics and a little bit of astrophysics. I'm not going to try to go too deep into it. The objective of this is not for me to give you everything on a platter. It's to give you the points where you can go and research it for yourself. I'm going to give you the core, and then you can go and look up the links that I've given you and formulate your own opinions on stuff. So a little bit of metaphysics first. How many of you are aware of Drunvalo Melchizedek? Okay, about half. Amazing man. He's very, very aware. And he has a book called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. And I've listed it there. It's a book that every person should have in their library, whether they believe or don't believe. Whether you're spiritual or non-spiritual, religious, non-religious, scientific, non-scientific. Because he covers everything. And in particular, what he covers is how the universe came into being. Now, this whole universe that we live in is just a thought construct. It's not a reality, it's a perceived reality. And it's just a thought. Just like you have a thought and it's real to you, Source decided, you know what? This is me. I'm a sphere of what I know. Everything that I know is contained in this sphere. But I haven't experienced everything that I know. So do I really know it? It's like so many people go, oh yeah, I know that, I know that. They haven't experienced it, but they're intellectualizing that they know it. But it's only once you've truly experienced something. Like no man knows what childbirth's like. They can say, oh yeah, I know it. I know it because I've seen my wife give birth. You know, I've seen all those sorts of things. So I know what childbirth's about. Can you imagine a man saying to a woman, yeah, I know what childbirth's like? What's a woman going to look at him and go, get real? You have to experience it to know what it's like. And that's what we're talking about here. So Source said, I'm going to project myself to the edge of myself and duplicate what I do. Now I've created his source, and we all know the source of everything is just love. It's a state of being. It's not something that you can give to someone. It's not something that you can get back. So when anyone says, I'm giving you love, or I love you, or I get love from this person, you don't. Love is a state of being. That's all it is. And it's a wondrous state, and it's not dependent on anyone else. So Source says, let's shift over here to be everything that I'm not. So we're going to have the absence of love. And then it oscillates backwards and forwards between these two things, creating contrast, creating conflict. And in moving here, which is a straight line, it creates this shape, which is like a UFO, which scientists have realised is what light is shaped like. And it's called a vesica piscus. Piscus, I think. Can't spell it properly. And they've worked out that light has this shape. And it sort of fluidly goes backwards and forwards. Because when God said, "Let there be light," that was the first movement, this directional thing to here, which creates a there and a here. It creates the duality. That's where the duality came from being here to there. It also, in going from here to there, takes time. So the first dimension is the singularity, which we've all heard about, the void, the singularity. The second dimension is time. And in going from here to there and backwards and forwards, it creates an oscillation, which is vibration. And that's why everything in this entire universe is just a vibration. Everything. The frequency will shift. That's why we've got light and sound and subatomic physics. They have different frequencies, but all they are is vibration. So here we've got the first part of everything. Here's the next stuff. Oh, the absence of love generates fear. Fear is absolutely essential for Source to be able to have a mirror of itself. It cannot experience itself without the mirror of itself, which is fear. That's why fears are so important. That's why we should not suppress them. That's why we should not bury them. We should embrace them, because they are there to reflect our consciousness. If you don't have eyes, you can't see light reflecting off the walls, so you have no feedback. If you have no ears, you can't hear. Therefore, you have no feedback on your consciousness. You put somebody in one of those sensory deprivation tanks, deprive them of light, sound, and all of those things, and they go into a totally altered state of consciousness because they have no reflection back to where they are. So that the perception that we have now is because of these fears that we have. That's one of the things that gives us our consciousness. So the next thing that happens is Source, that was great. Source did that for any amount of time and then went, okay, I've explored all the options in that. I've gone slowly from here to there. I've gone fast. I've created all the different vibrational energies. What do I do next? Go along the edge here to the point where they connect. Now we've got rotational energy, which is why absolutely everything in this universe rotates around something. There is no such thing as stillness in this universe. It does not exist. So everybody who's trying to still their mind or do all of this, you're going against the universe. It ain't going to happen. You're not meant to have a still mind. You're meant to have a flowing mind. And so many of the light workers, and please don't be offended by anything I say. And if you do get offended, maybe it's triggering a truth. Because only the truths cause us to react a certain way. If you try to bring anything into balance, you are trying to stagnate energy. You are trying to pull it so it does not move. Balance is stagnation. There is no such thing as balance in the universe. The key word is flow and harmony. You do not want your life in balance, because you're spending all of this energy trying to pull it into stagnation, and the whole power of the universe is going to go and knock you off balance all the time. So you just fight harder and harder and harder to bring your life into balance. Doesn't happen. Can't do it. Source won't have it. But you bring it into flow. Now that's different. And here's an image for you. I'm in the middle of a river. I'm swimming against the current so I can stay exactly where I'm meant to be. I'm trying to stay balanced. I'm using all of my energy and I'm getting nowhere. But the minute I stop doing that, I go with the flow. And that's where the fear kicks in, because where am I going? I don't know where I'm going. Well, you're going somewhere new and exciting. That's what Source wants. That's why Source moved. Because it wants new stuff to happen. And it creates rotational energy. And in doing that, it creates the third dimension. So that's a little bit of metaphysics to go into stuff. So the key aspect here is this rotational energy aspect, because the next thing we're going to go into is a little bit of astrophysics. All of the physical aspects of the universe fall down to simple mathematical things. Is everybody familiar with the Fibonacci spiral? Okay, for those of you who aren't, it's pretty simple. You take the number 1 and you add it to another 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. 21, 34, and on and on and on and on and on ad infinitum. You'll see it everywhere in nature. Trees create branches based on this, and flower petals based on this. And the great thing is, if you take these two numbers and you divide, you get 2 by 1 is 2. 2 and 3 in divide is 1.5. The halfway measure in here keeps getting closer and closer and closer to 1.618, which is what they call the golden mean, or pi. Absolutely everything in the universe is based on this. The length of this part of my finger to that is 1 to 1.6. The length of this part of my finger to that finger is 1 to 1.6. The length of this to this is 1 to 1.6. This to this, 1 to 1.6. It's everywhere. It's a universal rule. Back with that other figure that we had here, this figure keeps going around and it does the same things over and over again, creates another thing around here, and eventually it forms a symbol that is known as the flower of life. In this, all of these are feminine. Everything that is a curve is feminine energy, okay? But if I take the centre and I connect it to another one here, I get a straight line. And if I take the centre here and connect it to another one, I get a straight line. When you do all of the straight lines and connect up here, they're all masculine energies. You create every single subatomic crystalline structure that everything is built on. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Every part of your body is in here. And there's a thing called Metronon's cube, and that's, I'm flying through this stuff because you can grab the book if you're more interested in it, but it gives you some background into what we're going on. Here's an interesting thing. This image has been found various places around the world. In particular, there's a temple in Egypt in Abydos, and this temple is over 100,000 years old, and it sits behind the temple of Seti. And the Egyptologists tell you that they dug this temple 50 feet into the ground and then put these massive red granite blocks in there. Yeah, that really makes sense, that you would dig it underground and then put the blocks in. What does make sense is it was built and then at some time some massive tsunami came over and covered it up to the hilt. And then they built another temple on the ground beside it because they knew it was there. But this temple's been excavated, and if you get the chance to go to Egypt, you have to go there. It's extraordinary. There's no hieroglyphics on any of the major big red granite blocks in temples. None. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go into it, but if you're interested in Egypt, I can go into it. But what is interesting is this symbol is on these blocks. It's not painted on. It's not drawn on. It's not carved on, it is laser etched into the stone. Laser etched into the stone. And it's over 100,000 years old. We do not have lasers today that can do that. But there it is. It's there, and it's the only symbol, this flower of life, which contains all of the structure of everything. So let's go to the formation of our solar system, because we've got to sort of find out what 2012 and all this stuff's about. The background information will become more relevant as we go through stuff. So I just need to get it all the way. That's the hard stuff. That's the brain-teasing stuff. From here on, it's easy. When our solar system was forming, all of the cosmic dust and everything starts spinning because everything's rotational energy. So it all starts rotating. And have you ever wondered why scientists can't explain gravity? They can tell you what it does and the effects of it, but they can't explain it. Because everything in this universe comes from source, right? Can we accept that as a given? Everything comes from source? Everything comes from source down. Highest vibration, lowest density. Okay? Highest vibration, lowest density. Down to lowest vibration, highest density. Now, density is just how many molecules you can cram into a little bit of space. Now, the interesting thing about that is, because everything is just this continuum of vibration, look around. All you're seeing is slowed down light. Every person you look at is just slowed down light. Slowed down through all sorts of different frequencies, slowed down through sound. Sound is slowed down light. Matter, is just slowed down sound into a higher density. So when the sun was first forming, it wasn't gravity pulling everything together, it was actually things being compressed from outside. It was consciousness compressing down and slowing down vibration. That's why scientists can't explain gravity, because they think it's a pulling thing and it's not. It's a compression thing. So here we've got all of our little dust, cosmic bits and pieces and hydrogen atoms and all those things, all being compressed down so it can form a level of consciousness. Because there's like tram stops along the way here. And we can give them names. We can call it 11th density, or 9th dimension, or 7th dimension, or 5th dimension, until we get down to 3rd dimension. It's just a label. And I'll give you an example. If I play a G string on a guitar and my ears can only hear G, nothing else, and then I tune that guitar string up to a G sharp, when I play it, I can't hear it. It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. That sound doesn't exist because I can't hear it. That's why people say, I don't believe in fifth dimensional beings, because I've never seen one. Because you can only see with your eyes in a light spectrum that's this big. Can anyone here see infrared? Can anyone here see ultraviolet? But we know they exist, but we can't see them because our measuring device doesn't have it. So here's all of these atoms compressing down to form our sun, and they're spinning. Whenever you have a fluid that is spinning, it moves around. And remember, no balance in the universe. Don't want balance. So it's out of balance. So as it's spinning, it's out of balance and it wants to try and balance it the same way as that Fibonacci spiral is getting closer and closer and closer to 1.618 but never gets there. It's trying to balance itself. So this little bit that's on the side here starts to move apart and eventually gets thrown off. And this part comes more into balance and eventually ignites and forms our sun. But as it's spinning, it forms a galactic plane of dust. I'm going to sort of draw this as best I can. Like a CD that sort of radiates out. Has anyone seen what happens when you vibrate something with sand on top of it, like a disc, how it forms rings? Have you ever looked at the rings of Saturn? What they are is they're harmonic nodes. Whatever the frequency is of the thing here, it creates nodes. And those node points are where things will start to form. So there is a real mathematics, and you can look this up as well, as to where planets will form around an object. So our solar system, while it's forming our sun, is also forming planets through rotational energy and vibration. And here's one of the interesting points. Here's the Earth. The Earth does not sit in one of those harmonic points. The Earth was not an original planet of this solar system. And we'll go into a little bit of the metaphysics later in terms of the tetrahedron. Does everyone know the tetrahedral structures and vibrations? It's one of the very first levels of vibrational consciousness, and the Earth has that structure. But Jupiter and Saturn have much more complex sacred geometries about them. If you look at Saturn from the top, the clouds form a hexagon shape. It has a different vibrational energy because it's one of the original planets in this solar system. So just remember that for the moment, that here's the Earth sitting somewhere that isn't a natural harmonic within the thing. So it wasn't part of our original plan. So we've got to think, well, where did it come from then? Which we'll get to. So we'll add another ring out here. So we've got Mars, and then we've got Jupiter, but in between we've got the asteroid belt. Okay? In the meantime, this little bit of cosmic plasma that was thrown off from the sun goes off here, and it does the same thing. It starts to form its own little circle, and it forms its own little planets around it. But this one doesn't have enough mass to ignite the way the sun does. So what it forms is something that's called a brown dwarf. A brown dwarf star. And here's something that I don't know if anyone saw this the other day, but there was an article on the internet where scientists are starting to think now that maybe our solar system might have a dwarf star. Because every single solar system they have ever discovered is at least a binary system. Some have 3 stars. Every single solar system is at least a binary star. So now they're coming out saying, well, there's a possibility that we may have a brown dwarf star. Because this is the way the Illuminati work. They give you the information in through the back door so you don't really know what's going on. Most of us have been aware of Nibiru, whatever you want to call it, the destroyer, Planet X, for ages. How did it come about? Up until the beginning of the last century, I think it was 1927, we could see Saturn. That was as far as we could see Saturn. And when they started analysing Saturn's orbit, they realised there was something of bigger mass outside of Saturn that was pulling it out of its regular orbit. So they punched the figures into a computer when the computers came around, or they calculated, whatever they did, and they found Neptune. They went, yay, that's it, we found it. And then when they analysed Neptune's orbit, they went, oh, hang on a minute, something else is pulling Neptune around. So they did their calculations again, and lo and behold, they discovered, hang on. Well, they found Uranus first, and then they found Neptune. So they thought, that's it, we've solved the problem. And then they analysed Neptune's orbit and went, no, hang on a minute, there must be something bigger outside of that because it's being pulled out of orbit by something else. And then they found Pluto. Well, Pluto's a P. That's not doing it. So they then said, there must be something bigger outside of Pluto that is pulling it, and it's got to be huge, it's got to be massive. And in 1983, NASA announced that there was a brown dwarf star outside of our solar system, which belongs to this star. It's not from somewhere else. It has an orbit around our sun, because everything revolves around it, and because this came from our sun, it has an orbit around our sun. Are they telling us this? No. Why not? Why wouldn't they tell us this? So now we know that these things happen. So if we look at all of the planets are on what we call a planetary equator thing. So everyone thinks this is what happens. Here's the sun, and then you go out in a line and you've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter. Is that what everyone thinks? That they're all in this nice little flat plane? Because guess what? These planets are actually all pulled, their orbits all sort of go off that way from the galactic, because they've all been pulled by this brown dwarf out of this normal orbit where they started. So this thing's going through backwards and forwards, and it's got a number of planets the size of Jupiter around it. And at some time in the past, because it cuts through here, one of the planets from here collided with a planet that used to be where the asteroid belt was. And the bulk of it kept going off around this sun and reformed. But part of it went crashing off into what is now Earth's orbit, this rotating bit of molten rock, and the leftovers stayed in where the asteroid belt is. That seems pretty simple, doesn't it? Scientists telling you that? No. Why are they not telling you that? Because they don't want you to know that we could have a collision, because that would scare us. So we won't tell you that. In the meantime, the bit that was the Earth does exactly the same thing. It's out of balance, it's a rotating fluid because it's molten rock, and in trying to balance itself, it creates a little bulge and it throws it off. That's where the moon came from. The moon used to be part of the Earth, of this molten bit. How do we know that? What proof do we have of that? Well, when they examined the moon rocks, they were exactly the same as the Earth. That's a pretty good start. The other thing is, the moon is pulling away from the Earth 3 centimetres a year. So if it's pulling away 3 centimetres a year, you only have to go back and back and back, and there was a time when the two of them were together. It's pretty simple, and it was about 4 to 5 billion years ago, if you do the simple maths. But there's one more piece of evidence. When you have two objects that rotate around one another, they have what's called a centre of gravity. Okay? It's the central point at which they rotate around. The centre of gravity of these two objects is about 3,000 kilometres inside the crust of the Earth. The only way that could happen would be if the two objects were once one. So why is that relevant? Why am I telling you that? Is that part of what's going on here? Yeah, it is. Because what was left on the Earth was a scar, the land bridge, the bump where it used to connect. Has anyone heard of Pangaea? Pangaea was the original one continent. Because remember they say how it was one continent and it all broke up? They ever tell you how it broke up or why it broke up? Or how it formed in the first place? No. Why not? Because if you start getting the answers to those questions, you'll go deeper. Well, I'm going to tell you, because you have a right to know. We've got this one landmass here, and the moon is out here, but for now I'm going to put it over here. Where does the water go on the planet? Where does our water go? Lots of places? The water, that's a really interesting question. The water goes lots of places. It actually doesn't. What determines where the water goes? The moon. The gravity of the moon pulls all the water to here and it balances on the other side. It's pulled to the moon, so the water stays exactly where it is. So what causes the tides? No. What causes tides on planet Earth? Because the water stays exactly pulled to the moon. The rotation of the Earth causes the tides. Okay? Because the Earth rotates underneath it. The water doesn't move, the Earth's moving. Originally they used to do it together. But over time, because the moon was pulling away, it started to lag behind. The further it got away, the more it lagged behind. So we think the moon is rotating around the Earth, when in actual fact the moon is lagging behind the Earth's rotation, but all the water is staying exactly where it is with the moon. Important for you to know that for what's going to happen down the track. Okay? If you have a question at any time, please fire it at me. So we've got this one continent. So here's the Earth going through space, and it's got now the moon's pulled away from it. What causes the Earth to try to balance itself now? What's going to have enough gravitational force to pull this crust apart enough so that the Earth can balance? Because the crust of our planet, you know when we see a steel mill and they're milling the steel and you get this stuff on top of it called slag, which is sort of a crust that forms on the molten metal. That molten metal is caused by the light impurities hitting the cooler air. And that slag is exactly what the crust of our planet is. Because what's the core of our planet? Molten metal. So the outside of it is just a crusty slag. But originally it was just one mass. So what caused it to break up? Anyone have any thoughts? The brown dwarf star. Because what's the brown dwarf star got? Massive gravity. Okay. Now the brown dwarf star could be anything from a third the size of the sun to a half the size of the sun. Okay. In comparison, if this is our sun, a brown dwarf's probably about that big and the Earth's about that big. So it's big. And it has massive gravitational pull. It also throws out huge amounts of infrared heat. Now you can't see it with a visible eye because it doesn't throw off visible light because it didn't have enough mass to ignite. But it throws off huge amounts of infrared heat. Starting to think what the real cause of global warming might be? Because guess what? About 2.5, 3 years ago, scientists made an extraordinary discovery. Neptune, which used to rotate like this, had been pulled over on its side and was now rotating that way. They didn't know why. What would cause a planet to be pulled over on its side? Maybe a little brown dwarf, perhaps, that was coming close to it. Beginning of 2009, we come in a little bit closer, we get to Saturn. And Saturn suddenly has 12 months of extraordinary electronic storms that have never existed before. Every time you come in, they've found every single planet in our solar system is heating up, is having extraordinary storms going on them. There are storms raging on Jupiter at the moment. Mars is heating up. The Earth's heating up. Now, I was in Los Angeles and I met a woman who was an expert in global warming. She'd written PhDs on it and everything. So I said to her, fantastic. You can answer some questions that have been really bothering me. She said, no problems. I said, our polar caps are melting, right? She said, yes. I said, because of what we're doing to the atmosphere? She said, yes. I said, right, so it's all the polar ice that's melting because the air's heating up. Yes. I said, let's go to the North Pole. Because the North Pole is a giant iceberg. 10% of it is above water and 90% of it's below. But it's the 10% above that's melting, right? That's what we're seeing because of what we're doing to the air. She said, yes. I said, see, I'm no expert, but what's the air temperature at the North Pole? 30 degrees below freezing. So how does the ice that's in below freezing melt because of the air? She went, well, I said, well, hang on, let's go to the South Pole, because the South Pole's a continent, okay? And they have a glacier there which is a mile thick, and there's more snow falling at the South Pole than ever before. And they are so concerned that that glacier will slip off the continent. Have you heard that concern? They're totally scared that that whole glacier is going to fall off.
There's two of them, I think.
Do you know why? Because of the water underneath the glacier acting like a lubricant. So it's not the top of the South Pole that's melting, because guess what the air temperature is at the South Pole? -70. It's 1 mile below, away from the atmosphere, where it's melting. It's melting in contact with the continent. So can you explain to me why that's melting? She couldn't. I said, can you explain to me why every single planet in our solar system is heating up at the moment? Because I'm sure we don't have human civilizations on that causing greenhouse gases. She said, where are you getting all this information from? I went, you're the expert. Surely you've done all the research, because I'm getting that from NASA, from independent scientists. She walked away. Didn't want to know. No, you're a fool. You're an idiot. I said, okay.
Did she know, or was she just denied?
Head in the sand. She prided herself on being an expert of something, and she had ignored the evidence that contradicted what she was saying. And we find this a lot with our academics. So there we've got some object that's causing all of these things to happen, global warming. So what evidence do we have that this has happened before? That this thing has come through, and it's... Because when it comes close here to the continent, it pulls the continent apart and it causes fractures, and Mother Earth wants to try and balance herself, so these things move. That's what causes continental drift. Ask a scientist what causes continental drift and they'll tell you, well, the tectonic plates are moving because of the lava. And I said, no, that's what's happening, but what's causing it? And they go, well, the plates move because they move. There has to be a reason for them to move. This is the reason. They break up because the planet is trying to balance itself. How often does this brown dwarf star come through? Do we have any record of the last time it was here? Well, we do. Because the ancient Egyptians wrote about a pole shift. Because guess what happens when this crust gets pulled loose from the core? When it's attached, we've got a North Pole and a South Pole. It's pretty simple. But when the crust gets pulled loose from the core, you have this very, very thin North Pole and a very, very massive North Pole under it, and a very thin South Pole and a very massive South Pole. Does anyone know what happens when you put two like magnets together? They push apart. The core of our planet is massive. So what's going to move, the crust or the core? The crust. And what happens is it literally pushes away and turns upside down. So the crust of our planet will turn totally upside down and reattach. Now, if you ask the scientists to explain a pole shift, They make it sound like that the north and south just change, that there's no big deal about it. But all the evidence, do you remember when they found the mammoths that used to live in temperate zones and they found them frozen solid with food still in their mouths? Because in the space of an hour they went from a temperate zone to subarctic temperatures. Because this shift happens over a couple of hours. That's how fast it happens. Now here's the thing. If you are on the equator part here, if you're here and the shift happens, all hell breaks loose. Because apart from all the earthquakes and everything that go on, the water stays where it is and the planet rotates underneath. So you think there's a tidal wave coming to you when in fact you're moving under the water at 1,000 miles an hour. But if you're here at the pivot point, you do this over 3 hours. So if you're in a pivot point, you're not going to notice anything other than the sky's going to turn around. And when you read the ancient Egyptian texts, they tell about the sky turning around, the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. They describe a total pole shift. So do the ancient Sumerians. So do the ancient Mayans. So when was the last one? The last one was 1600 BC. That was when the last total pole shift happened. There have been two others since then. There was one in, when was it? There was one in 5200 BC. There was one in 8800 BC. So this is from scientific. They measure it. Because they measure it from the lava that's laid down. When fresh lava is laid down, as it solidifies with the magnetic field in it. That's how they can tell when these things happen. So the last one that the Egyptians and everyone talk about was 1600 BC. Now we start to ask, well, when's the next one due? Because this thing has an orbit of around about 3,600 years. So 1600 BC, 3,600 years, smack bang now. Smack bang now. So we know what happens with a pole shift. It pulls the crust apart, it has huge magnetic forces, it has all of this infrared heat going on. What's happening on the planet at the moment? Earthquakes, more than usual, bigger than usual. Volcanoes are going off that were dormant. We're seeing changes in the temperature because of the heat. Everything that are preliminary signs of a pole shift. So is there any evidence to support it? Actual physical evidence? There is. Now, you all know who NASA is. They're the guys who've lied to you about so many things over the years. The whole Apollo program was just a cover-up because NASA has been on the moon since 1959. You all aware of that? Been on the moon since 1959. John F. Kennedy found out about it, was going to tell the world, and they went, no, you're not going to tell anyone. Boom. Do you know who shot John F. Kennedy, by the way? Would you believe the driver of the car? The first bullet came through and hit him in the back, but the one that blew his head apart was the driver of the car, and you can see it in the footage. Not the footage they originally showed you, which cut the driver out of it. But the original footage that has the driver in it shows this trained secret security guy take his left hand off, put it under his hand like that, and at that moment, Kennedy's head gets blown off and he turns back. You can find that out for yourself. That's just Illuminati. That's the little byproduct for you to throw in there. So, do we have any proof? Well, in 1983, they discovered this brown dwarf. And then they discovered it because in 1983, they put up IRIS, the infrared satellite. 9 months after they put Iris up, they announced that they had found this brown dwarf. And 2 days later, they denied it. No, we didn't. We didn't find anything. They covered the whole thing up straight away. But the cat was out of the bag because they'd already made the announcement. In 1992, they put up, I think it was 2 more infrared satellites. From 2002 to 2009, they put up another 7 infrared satellites. They spent billions of dollars fixing the Hubble telescope because it was broken and turned it into an infrared telescope. Suddenly, there's all this interest in infrared telescopes. They even built one at the South Pole. Why would you build one at the South Pole? Well, it just so happens, here's north and south, and I'm doing it upside down from where it was before, but the orbit of this thing is that way. So the best place to view it is from the South Pole. They say it's because the air is clear there. But they rushed to build this thing in 2004. They rushed to build it. So suddenly they've put all of these infrared satellites up. So what are they focusing on? What are they actually looking at? Interestingly enough, there's a little comet called Elenin. Now, according to NASA, this was discovered by a Russian amateur astronomer, and you can even find a page about him and information about him on the web. And he discovered this tiny little comet, which has an orbit, strangely enough, that comes in and around the Sun, and then there's the orbit of Mercury, Venus and Mars. I did a little bit of checking with some colleagues of mine in LA, one of whom who is very closely connected in. He's a past president of the Navy Reserve, very connected in through the CIA and the FBI. And I asked him about this Elenin, discovered by Leonid Elenin. I said, what's the story? He said, he doesn't exist. It's a cover name. He said, it's not a comet, and we'll go into why it's not a comet, but it's coming from the constellation of Leo. The whole project is under the overview of the National Institute of Defence, and Elenin is an acronym for Extinction Level Event Near Impact Nibiru. I said, whoa, smoking gun here. But I want more proof because they say it's a comet. Now, a comet is made of dust, dirt and ice. Okay? It doesn't have an infrared spectrum. Okay? And it doesn't have a huge gravitational field. It's just a chunk of dust and ice. So why have they got infrared satellites tracking it? Why are they using their most expensive infrared satellites tracking a dust and ice ball? That doesn't add up to me. That doesn't make sense. Also, do you remember when Comet Kohoutek came through and Comet Halley came through? And whenever there was a comet coming through, NASA are jumping up and down saying, you've got to see, it's going to look fantastic. It's going to be across the sky, and there was all of this hype about comets, 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 comets. Heard anything from NASA about Elenin? Because guess what? At its closest point to the Earth, it's only 21 million miles away. That's 1/5 the distance between us and the Sun. Most of the other comets that they've talked about have been out here somewhere. 400, 500 million miles away. And they were jumping up and down. And they're saying nothing about this? That doesn't add up to me. Doesn't add up. Something doesn't add up. But I'm still not thinking they're lying to us much.
They probably want to shoot something at it.
Maybe. So then I started looking, and there was a coincidence, because I get my dates right, it was February 27th, and you may have this on your list. February 27th, 2010, this little comet was in a direct alignment between the Earth and the Sun. Direct alignment. Now, vibrational harmonics work such that if they directly line up, you get an amplification of energy. So gravitational waves are no difference to that. If they line up, the gravitational waves amplify. So on that date, there was an earthquake in Chile of, it was huge, 9 point something or other. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? That this little comet is in directly line with the Earth and the Sun, and there's a massive earthquake on it. That's just a coincidence. Well, there was another coincidence, because when the Earth came around the other side here, and the Earth was in alignment, and then the comet was a little bit closer, but they're in alignment again, and that was September 4th, 2010. There was an earthquake in Christchurch. That was just another coincidence, by the way. Two coincidences. And then the Earth came back round again, and then the next time it was in alignment with the Sun, and now this is closer, March 11th, there's an earthquake in Japan. Once is a coincidence, twice is pushing it, 3 times, wait a minute, something's going on here. And on there, you will see a list of every time this little comet is in alignment with our planet and either the Sun or some other body, there's a major earthquake. No way could that be a comet. All of those alignments, earthquake, 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 all the changes that are going on, here's a smoking gun. But do we have any other proof? Because I'm not trying to convince you here, I'm just saying I'm having questions about this. Are you all aware of Google Earth? That you can punch in any address and bang, you can see it. Are you also aware that there are certain areas, because NASA controls Google Earth? Did we say who NASA are, by the way? You know they're not a US department. They're a private company. And NASA came from Nazi Germany. All the guys that built all the rockets, they were all from Nazi Germany. Because NASA is owned by the Illuminati. Okay? So NASA have an agenda. Okay? So when we go to Google Earth, try and have a look at Area 51. Why not?
Everyone's typed.
Because it's blacked out, isn't it? It's censored. Okay? Because they don't want you to know what's going on there. So they censor it. They put a big black square on it. Yeah. Anywhere they don't want you to know what's there, they put your big black square.
Bob Lazar works there. Bob Lazar from America, he worked for NASA for a few years. And they tried to get rid of his, all his diplomas, degrees and everything. They tried to finish him off.
Yeah, tried to discredit him. So many people have had accidents.
Yeah, a lot of
them. So that's Google Earth. Are you aware of Google Sky? Google Sky is run by, guess who? NASA. And they plug into all of their satellites. So you can go into Google Sky and you can look at the whole sky as it is right now. So when I say this to you, go to Google Sky and have a look at the constellation of Leo. No, it's not blacked out. Okay. When you look at it, there's nothing untoward about it. Then go to the little right-hand corner and shift up in the infrared spectrum. And as you shift it to the infrared spectrum, suddenly appears an object that looks like that in the infrared spectrum. The winged destroyer the ancient Egyptians talk about. Here's a little brown dwarf in the constellation of Leo coming towards it.
They would show that, but they won't show Area 51. 21. So they're kind of giving information on here, but not.
Because they think that most of us are absolutely stupid and wouldn't even bother looking. And they can fob it off left, right and centre. The interesting thing is though, if you go into the constellation of Virgo and have a look, there's a big black square in the constellation of Virgo. And you can see something coming out from behind it, which is a binary star system. Now, this might sound bizarre, but the reason they're blacking that out is because there are things coming from that star system. Visitors.
Is there 2 star systems that are alive and running at the moment there?
But it's a binary system.
Yeah, but I've heard that there's 2 planets that they're actually living on.
Oh, no, we're talking about Nibiru.
Oh, okay.
Nibiru and the Anunnaki, which is a whole other thing.
What is Orion's belt?
Orion's belt?
Yeah, Orion's belt.
It's in the... Can anyone remember the constellation it is? I can't remember it. It's in the constellation of Orion. I'll give you a little interesting fact about that. Those of you who have read the books of Baval and West, who say that Orion is the copy of the stars in the sky, that when you see the pyramids on the ground in Giza, okay, and you're spot on because they're a mirror image. They're not a copy of it. They're a mirror image. And the Egyptians don't work that way. So the only way that those could match up would be if the pyramids were built when the earth was up the other way. So the pyramids were built before the last pole shift. Okay? There's no one else that's got that yet. Okay? It's pretty simple. It's like, oh, right. Here's another thing. The Sphinx used to have a lion's head. And if you knew that something was going to happen on a particular date in your calendar, what would you do? You'd mark it. Ahead of schedule, you'd mark it. Well, they knew thousands of years ahead that something was going to come from the constellation of Leo at that time when it lines up there. So the Sphinx wasn't built at the time that it lines up. It was built way before it as a warning to say when this lines up in the constellation of Leo, that's when the shit's going to hit the fan. And that was the last pole shift.
Alex, quick question.
Yep.
Can you actually see that it's blacked out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But why don't they do it properly and completely remove it so you wouldn't even question if something was blacked out there?
Because we're stupid. And we're not even going to look at that.
There is
Okay.
exactly the address where you can go and punch it.
Yeah.
And who's going to believe anyone that...
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And they'll just discredit you or whatever. Because they just don't want you. And if they discredit you enough and make it difficult enough, then you'll give up, won't you?
That's right.
Also, Alex, why Egypt?
Egypt?
Why that particular part of the earth? Why it's not somewhere like, I don't know, in Asia? Or
Okay. There are pyramids off the coast of Japan. There are pyramids in China. They're all built around the 19.5 degree mark. And there's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. Because that diagram I showed you of the flower of life creates what they call geometric solids. Please tell me I've got a mental block on the sacred geometries. And when you create a tetrahedron, it looks like the Star of David, but imagine they're three-dimensional. And when they fit inside a sphere, the points where these touch are at 19.5 degrees in the latitude. So they're energy points.
Sorry, is there any correlation with like the Jewish symbol?
That's a whole other lecture. Okay, every single religion has been created by the Illuminati to ensnare people. Every single religion, including New Age, including the New Age religions. They control everything.
Behind all of that?
We'll get to that in the second half. It's a great question. And it's one that might shock you a little bit, but we'll work through it. So here's this body coming through. Look, we've got a brown dwarf coming through. The evidence is overwhelming. They're trying to hide it. They don't want you to know about it. What we want to know is, okay, we know the impacts are going to be pretty big, but how big and when? What's the time frame? If we track through Elenin, you will notice that on August 17th, I've gone publicly on this one, because there is an alignment between the Earth, Venus, the Sun and Mercury. They're in a straight line, and Nibiru is at right angles to the Sun. At August the 17th, I'm being told there's going to be a massive earthquake on the planet. It will probably be somewhere between Alaska and San Francisco, and I got told this last year that it was going to be Seattle. They told me there was going to be a major earthquake around Seattle in... You got a shiver? Thank you. So August 17 is another sign that something's going to happen. But let's go a little bit further through, because when the Japan earthquake happened, Nibiru sort of comes through like that. And there's a time now where Nibiru and our Earth are travelling at the same rate. So we're not seeing any major changes because it's still around about 1.5 AU away. AU is a measure of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's like the radius measurement. When the Japan earthquake happened, it was 2 AU away, and we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. The next alignment happens on September 26th this year, and it is between us and the Sun. And at that point, it is 0.38 away from us. Now, gravitational fields, it's 0.38, which is around about 40 million miles. It's 4/10 of the distance to the Sun. Gravitational fields and infrared work on what's called an inverse square relationship. So every unit of distance, the force magnifies by the square of it. When it was 2 away, we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. On September 26, the forces are 25 times greater. The gravitational forces, the infrared forces, they're all 25 times greater on that date. You see that list there of all the earthquakes? Every single one of those places, there will be earthquakes. And the magnitude of those earthquakes, does everybody know how the Richter scale works? Richter scale, for those of you who don't know, is that an 8.8 magnitude earthquake and an 8.9, the 8.9 is 10 times greater than the 8.8. Okay? And a 9 earthquake is 10 times greater than the 8.9, which means that to go from 8.8 to 9 is 100 times bigger. Okay? It's a logarithmic function. What I'm being told is on September 26th, the whole Pacific Rim will go with magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Okay? That is totally consistent with the mathematics. I said there was going to be stuff that, you know, you might go, what? The whole Pacific Rim. New Zealand will disappear. Japan will disappear. Indonesia will disappear. China will disappear. Korea will disappear. Russia will disappear. The west coast of America will disappear. The whole lot.
What about Australia?
Whole lot.
What about Australia? Yeah,
East coast of Australia will not be affected by the earthquakes per se, but they will be affected by the tidal waves that come from it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit before that. Okay? Before that happens, as you get into August, and this gets closer, the gravitational effects of this brown dwarf star are going to start to pull not only on the crust of the planet greater, but they're going to pull on our little old moon. Now, at the moment, the moon's got a fairly spherical orbit around the Earth, okay? But as this brown dwarf gets closer, it's going to pull the moon closer to it, and the moon is going to have a more elliptical orbit. So what's going to happen is the moon is going to be pulled into a more elliptical orbit. What effect will that have on the planet? The effect it will have is that whenever the moon is here, its gravitational pull on the water will be greater, so you are going to have massive king tides. So expect through August and the beginning of September that the major coastal cities of the world will all be flooded at some point. Not tidal waves, but massive tides. London, Amsterdam, Melbourne, Sydney, Venice. If there's a coastal city it's whole Netherlands.
And what about places like Hawaii, Thailand, in terms of tidal surges?
Everyone's going to be affected by it. Everyone's going to be affected by this. If you're living on the coast, and we've said to people, you're going to get a warning, sell your property and get out of there.
Can I ask you something?
Yep.
I also, a few years,
Shh, folks, please, I can't hear.
a few months back on TV, remember how we had that minor eclipse? I think it was last year.
That was a lunar eclipse. Yeah.
Now they're saying that we're going to have a major eclipse in November, but I don't know if it's this year or next year. I think they said next year.
Okay. Before we even get to that,
Okay.
September 26th, okay, for about a week before that, this object is going to be very, very obvious in our skies. One of the link, oh no, I don't think I put it on that sheet. There is a link of somebody who went into Soho, which is the, looks at the sun, and it's beautiful. It's March 15th or something like that. And there's an image of the sun, and there's an image of Venus, and there's this big black object there. Black, not throwing any light off, it's black. He went back a day later to confirm it all, and NASA had airbrushed it out. Airbrushed it out, because it was inside the orbit of Venus, which is where it is at the moment. So this object is going to cover 1/5 of the sky. Okay, 1/5 of the sky, and it's going to be moving along. By then, anarchy will be ruling because they'll have collapsed the financial markets and they'll have put most people into concentration camps. Does everyone know about the FEMA camps? Okay, the FEMA camps, there's about 800 of them around the US, and they house 50,000 people upwards. And they are detention centres with barbed wire and the whole thing around them. 800 of them that can house 50,000 people each adds up to 40 million people. They're all fully manned, and yet the American prison system is overcrowded. Why can't they put some of their lower people into these detention centres? And the interesting thing about these FEMA camps is they have stockpiled coffins that can hold 3 bodies at a time. Why does the American government know that they're going to have to put 40 million people into detention centres for? Okay? And they're going to dispose of the bodies? Does this sound like something that happened? And who are the same people that are running all of this? It was a trial. They trialled everything out in the 40s.
So is that where religion is going to come in? But what is this like?
Religion's going to come in.
Is that where religion is going to come into all of this as well?
No.
No?
No.
So what's the purpose? For what reason?
Good, we'll get to all of that. Why are they doing that?
Yes.
Okay, why are the Illuminati doing it is a good question. Because they want to control everything, because they only need a certain number of people alive to be able to serve them. They have an agenda, which we'll get to in the second half. Okay, I want to get through this first half stuff so you know what's going on. When this object goes across the sky, it's going to cause an eclipse that will last at least 3 days. At least 3 days. But here's the big thing. When it lines up with the sun and our planet, there is going to be a cosmic sonic shockwave that will totally blow out our Van Allen belts and our magnetic fields, and will leave the planet totally open to gamma radiation. It's what they call in the Bible Gabriel's trumpet. When Gabriel's horn shall blow, the world shall da-da-da. It's a sonic blast to do with the lining up. The magnetic fields will be... They're already being weakened. It's like watching Star Trek. When the shields go down, bang. If you are out in the open at that point, you will literally be fried alive. It's like the vampire jumping out into the light. That's what's going to happen. So you need to be able to get out of direct light for the whole duration that our magnetic field is down, which could be up to 2-3 weeks. Okay, so that's the first big thing. So you've got massive earthquakes happening. Basically every volcano on the planet will go off at that time. Are you all aware of the super volcano in Yosemite National Park? No, those of you who aren't. There is a volcano in the northern part of America under Yosemite National Park. The caldera is 200 miles long and 80 miles wide. Last year I got an email that said in 3 days there had been 1,100 earthquakes in that spot. But it was nothing to worry about. The lake bed has risen. The lake is so hot now that no fish can survive in it. And there was 1,100 earthquakes just in one 3-day period, but it's nothing to worry about. Am I going to believe them? When you go to the site that shows all the earthquakes around the world, and they are airbrushing off and taking off earthquakes that are happening in certain locations because they don't want you to know that they're going on, because the US government has written off 60 million of its people who live in the top northwest. Because if it told them the truth, it would have to relocate them. And they're all expendable. So it's prepared to let them die. So you're going to have all these volcanoes going off. So you're going to have pyroclastic blasts going everywhere. So you've got level 12, 13 magnitude earthquakes, volcanoes at the same point. You know, it's not going to shift a little bit like this. We're talking about the distance here and there dropping like 400 metres down, not little bucklings. Okay? Have you ever seen like images of the French Alps that show the rock strata like that, side on? That happens in the space of a couple of minutes because the power of the earthquake causes the rock to liquefy and form waves. And then they break, and then when it stops, they reconfigure like that. They tell you that all of these mountain ranges have all been formed over thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. Lie. They happen in the space of minutes. Machu Picchu was a seaside village because Lake Titicaca is a salt lake and it's 1,500 metres in the air. It happened overnight when the pole shift happens. These are the extremes that these things happen at. So we've got the cosmic waves that are going to hit. You're going to have wind speeds over 1,000 miles an hour. You're going to have surface temperatures of 60 degrees plus. There will be wildfires all over the planet. Airspeed, cosmic radiation, all the water surfaces are going to dry up. The volcanic ash is going to cause huge amounts of acid rain. So the electromagnetic pulses are going to fry all electrics. Have you noticed how the satellites and TVs are starting to play up? Yeah? They're all going to go down. And they're trying to patch it and cover it up so you don't notice it. But as this thing gets closer, more and more of the satellites are going to go down. Okay? So that's September 26. Moving on from September 26, the next date you have to be concerned about is October the 17th. October the 17th, Nibiru is now 0.23. It's the closest point that it comes to us. That's 21 million miles away from the Earth. So at 21 mils, if there are any volcanoes that have not gone off by then, if there's any part of the planet that is not separated by then, it will do it then. Because the forces involved are now over 80 times what they were when the Japan earthquake happened. Next date on from that is November the 2nd, 3rd through to the 7th. And what happened then was, when this thing's coming through and it passed through the asteroid belt, it picked up a few travellers with it, like the tin cans behind a wedding car. So here you've got this massive gravitational object goes through the asteroid belt and it drags a whole lot of stuff with it. Some of them are this big, some of them are 100 miles large. Now the scientists will tell you that we've had all these extinction level events that stopped the Cambrian and the Mesozoic, 65 million years ago, that wiped out the dinosaurs, and they say there is something that causes an extinction level event every 26 million years. Well, sometimes when Nibiru comes through, we're not here at this close point, we're on the other side of the sun, so we're safe. But sometimes, maybe every 26 million years, we pass through the tail of this. And on November the 3rd to the 7th, we pass through the tail of this brown dwarf. So we are running a whole asteroid field. We're going to get huge numbers of showers. I've had this vision since I was a child, and now I know what it's about. It's a recurring thing that's coming to me year after year after year after year. Now I know what it's about. We have one saving grace at that time. Our moon is on the lee side. It can potentially shield us from some of the impacts. But I'm being told there will be major cities who will be obliterated by being hit by asteroids. And it's not one or two. There's going to be showers, massive showers of them, for about 3 days. And if you look at the other side of the moon, it is totally pockmarked with impact craters, different to the side that we see. So clearly it's done some sort of protection in the past. I'm feeling that the most likely time when the crust will totally separate and turn upside down will be October 17, because that's when the gravitational forces... It could go before then. Then November 23rd, there's another alignment which could cause more earthquakes, etc. But from then on, it starts to move further and further out. That's what's going to happen. That's when it's going to happen. And the wheres are pretty much everywhere will be affected. There are safe places to be, and we'll get into that in the second half, not just physically, but also spiritually. Okay, we're just giving you the physical stuff now. And then in the second half, Crystal will take you through a lot of the spiritual understandings, which will get you to understand why you've chosen to be here at this time when this is happening. And we'll cover a little bit of that in the second half. The last thing I want to leave you with before we have a break is this 2012. So what does 2012 mean? Okay. Where does the date December 21st, 2012 come from? December 21st, 2012. Mayan calendar? No. No. That date comes from the Illuminati. The date does not exist in the Mayan calendar. The Mayans do not talk about, they don't have our calendar date. So what people have supposedly done is they've tried to match the Mayan calendar to ours. But the Mayans don't talk about their calendar ending on a particular date as being significant. Like we don't go, oh, December 31st is the end of some massive thing. They talk about a change. They talk about a shift from the fifth sun, from the end of the fourth sun into the fifth sun. They don't mention anything about a brown dwarf. The Mayans talk about a shift of the sun. That's really important, the fourth sun, and we'll get into that. The date is being given by the Illuminati to trap the New Age people. To trap them into believing they have to prepare for this date, so they're caught totally unawares by what's going to happen in the next 2 months. And most New Age people have bought it hook, line and sinker. Because it's all tied into the Mayan calendar, and therefore it's about the ascension. And there's going to be no big earth changes because we can pray them away and we can do all of that, which we'll get into the second half. The Mayans talk about earth changes that precede it, but not at the same time. So what's happened is everybody has dumped everything onto this Illuminati constructed day. Everything to do with the birth of Jesus and all these things, they're all things that are tied into Illuminati ritual. That just happens to be the winter solstice. What a coincidence, because the Illuminati are all into that sort of stuff. Dates and all sorts of things. That comes from them. It's not a real date. But coincidentally, around that time is the beginning of a transition period. Okay? What else was I going to say about that? So Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, all of those prophecies that relate to what's going to happen in the next 2 months have all been dumped onto this date because people are stupid and they'll buy it. And if you tell them enough times, it comes from the Mayan calendar, it comes from the Mayan calendar, they'll believe it. It's not in the Mayan calendar at all. Nowhere. And here's another interesting thing. The Mayans were smart. They had the number 0. If I go from 3 BC to 2 BC to 1 BC, what year's next?
0.
The next year is 1 AD. There is no year 0 in our calendar. So straight away, we've lost a year off there. And at the time, there were 3 different calendars running at the turn of the millennium. 3 different calendars. And it's got pulled here, there and everywhere. Okay, it wasn't until Pope Gregory in 540 AD or something like that that we got the calendar that we have now, which interestingly enough was based on an old Mayan calendar, an old Egyptian calendar and all those things. So they've borrowed. Every religion has been created by the Illuminati and megalomaniacs borrowing stuff from here, there and everywhere. There's not an ounce of truth in any of it. If you're interested, I could tell you who Moses really was and who Jesus really was and how they've been corrupted and how they've been twisted to enslave the masses.
What about Orthodox, Serbian and Russian?
All of them are derivatives of the original lies that you've been told. And all of those lies have been there to enslave you and trap you, to stop you from free thinking that you have a total connection to Source every single microsecond. And there are no rules. Source does not have rules. There is no good and evil. There is no right or wrong. It's just an experience. And if Source doesn't have those rules and says to you, whatever you do enriches my being, then why do we suddenly feel that we have to listen to someone who tells us that we can only access that spiritual knowledge through them? And we have to do what they tell us to do, or we're heretics and be burned at the stake or excommunicated or something like that.
So is karma part of the lie?
Karma is non-existent unless you choose to believe it. There is only cause and effect. I let go of the pen, it falls down. There is no good or bad. But if you believe in karma, that's what you will manifest because you have total free will to create whatever you want.
So what about like past lives and people saying, oh, well, I did this in my past life, so now I've got this in this life?
Okay. Past lives implies that time is linear, and it's not. Time is simultaneous. You can have alternate lives and you can experience things. Let's say that you're an actor and you've chosen to play a role in a particular play. And having done that season, you then sit back afterwards and go, oh, I could have done that bit better. Yeah, I should have done that there. That would have been better. That's what you do. You find better ways to play the roles. and things that are more connected with him in love. And we can talk more about that later. So 2012. What's 2012 about? I'll give you what that's about and then we'll have a break. Okay. Our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy. And you've probably all seen pictures of the Milky Way galaxy. It's like a spiral galaxy that's looking at it from the top. And looking at it from side on sort of looks a little bit like a UFO sort of thing. At the middle of our galaxy, as with all galaxies, is a black hole, massive black hole. And black holes give out energy in two directions. They give it out in pulses that radiate outwards, like when you drop a pebble in a pond and they radiate out. So that's like on a plane, and they send it out in a spike from the centre. Okay, so here's our plane going through here, which is a big disc, and the pulses radiate out from there. Now our solar system's out here somewhere on one of these arms. We're not even a major player in the galaxy. Seriously, the human form is not. But everything revolves around something. So not only do we revolve around the galaxy, but we revolve around another solar system, i.e. Sirius. Ever wondered why we're so connected to Sirius? It's because we're in a paired orbit around a black hole in Alcyon. So we're going up and down as we go around, like that, like a carousel horse going up and down. Is anyone familiar with the Vedic yugas, where they divide civilization up to periods of ascent and descent that covers like 520,000 years or something like that? As we go up here, we're getting further away from the galactic plane, which is a gravity, and we slow down. And then we get pulled back and we accelerate. We are in a position of acceleration at the moment, and we're just about to go into this galactic plane, which is also known as the photon band. Okay? So what happens when we hit the photon band? Because people talk about spiritual ascension. Okay. It is impossible for you to spiritually ascend. Do you know why? Because you're already there. Remember how I said everything comes from source downwards? Your higher self has chosen to manifest into this dimension to experience. You've chosen to manifest. You may have forgotten it because you're caught up in the third dimensional stuff, but you cannot ascend to something that you already are. You just become aware of where you're perceiving it from. Are you so caught up in the play that you believe you're the character, or are you sitting in the audience admiring your work? You can't ascend because you already are every single vibrational aspect. So what is this so-called ascension about? I'm going to go back to nuclear physics, and I'm going to go to an atom, and the simplest atom of hydrogen, because we have a lot of hydrogen in us. We're basically hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. That's what most of us are. So we have a proton here, and we have an electron in what they call a shell. Does everyone sort of remember that from basic science or something like that? And then you get to helium, and helium has 2 and 2, and then you get the next one up and you get another shell and another shell. Even hydrogen, even though it's only got one proton here, this other energy shell still exists. Remember how we went back to the sun has these vibrational things that cause the planets to form in certain areas? As above, so below. The macro and the micro is exactly the same. When we go through the photon band, it's a huge pulse of energy. Ever put your foot down on the pedal of a piano and hit one note? And all the others vibrate? And it goes woo! When we go through the photon band, every single atom in your body gets hit by this energy, and the electrons jump to the next level, or maybe even to the level beyond that. So every single atom in your body becomes energized. And as you do that, you become less dense. higher vibration, less dense, which people go, oh, it's fifth dimensional existence. That's the physics of it. It's not some spiritual thing that you have to work to do. You could do that anytime you choose by shifting your perception. But what's happening here on this planet is a very, very different thing. This is going to happen, but it's the agenda behind it. And the second half, we're going to get into the who and the why. Apart from seeing this thing in the sky, there's also going to be 4 Jupiter-sized planets floating around at the same time. So the skies are going to look amazing. There's also going to be communication between the brown dwarf and our sun. By communication, I mean exchange of plasma. So they're going to be these massive coronal injections that are going to be happening. So the sky is going to look incredible. It's going to be pretty dangerous. There is a possibility that one of the other planets around Nibiru could collide with one of the other planets in our solar system or with the sun. I'm being told those things won't happen this time, but the sky is going to look amazing. Really, this is such an exciting time to be here. And I know it seems bizarre, but you'll work through, and Crystal will take you through this process of working through the initial shock to get you into your higher self to understand why you're here and to see the exciting aspects to all of this. So in the second half, I'm going to talk a little bit about the who and the why stuff, and then Crystal will also do some why stuff as well. The key to the who stuff goes back 4 billion years, because there's a race of reptilians called the Dracos, and they feel that they own this universe because they've been around here for so long. And they, in fact, owned this solar system for a long period of time. Hence why we had a period where the dinosaurs were the major species on the planet. Now, the thing about the Dracos is they operate from the lower realms of the 4th dimension. Okay? The lower realms of the 4th dimension down into the 3rd dimension. And they've been travelling around conquering everybody because they believe they have a right to. They don't have emotions. Some of you might have heard that there is a good reptilian race, and that there's the bad reptilians and there's the good reptilians. It's not true. The reptilians have an agenda, they have no emotions, and they will do whatever they need to do to achieve that result. So if they're being nice to you, which is what some people believe the reptilians are, they're not. They're just doing what they need to get their agenda. Now, the reason why the reptilians are the key in all of this is because they want to conquer the whole universe. Not just the 3rd dimensional realm, which is ruled by fear, which is the mirror. So they use fear to control everything from the 4th dimensional realm. Now, what you can do at the 4th dimension is you have the ability to shapeshift. So you can project onto 3rd dimensional forms. So you can control, because their agenda is to get up into the higher realms. They want to get up into the 5th dimension and the 6th dimension and 7th dimension to conquer it. But they can't, because they're rooted in fear. So what they decided to do was to get hold of some humanoid mammalian DNA and create hybrids, and to use like a Trojan horse to get into the 5th dimension. So through hybrid forms, they could get up into the fifth dimension to conquer it. So what they did on this planet, they started creating a whole lot of experiments 100 million years ago with their own DNA, trying to find a form that could get up in here, but they couldn't. There was also a big galactic war going on at the time, and 65 million years ago, the planet got hit by an asteroid, bang. And a truce was called between a galactic federation, and probably some of you have heard of it in some other form, of fifth dimensional up beings who live in a state of love. And they take various forms of that. So they declared that this planet Earth would be a hospital where beings from all over the galaxy could come here to work through their shit, where they could incarnate into forms to work out their karma, because they believe in it. And the Dracos said, we don't have a problem with that at all, so long as we can help. So we just need some access to some DNA to create some vehicles that these beings can incarnate into. So 20 million years ago, they got to a point, and I'm jumping a little bit because they created all the shrews and all the things first, but 20 million years ago, they created the old world monkeys. And the old world monkeys had between 20 and 80 chromosome pairs. Now the Dracos, they live in excess of 100 million of our years. And that may seem extraordinary, but imagine I'm a butterfly and I live for a day. And I look at you and I go, are you telling me you live 365,000 of my lifetime? No, that's not possible. So to a butterfly, the concept of us living for 80, 90 years is ridiculous. Well, imagine we're the butterfly to the Dracos. They live over 500 million years. So a couple of million years for them to do an experiment is nothing. Okay? So having created the old world monkeys, they went, okay, let's work out which one's best out of that. And 12 million years ago, they created gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and the gibbons. Now, the gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans had 48 chromosome pairs, I think, and the gibbons had 44. The gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans were a bit too strong, and the gibbons were a little bit, although they had the bipedal motion, they didn't have the strength needed. So what they did was they eventually settled on 46 chromosomes as the best vehicle to do that. Australopithecus, Peking man, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man. Now the interesting thing about Neanderthal man is Neanderthals had a brain capacity twice as big as ours. And the anthropologists will tell you that they were so stupid they died out. Doesn't quite resonate with me. But what does resonate with me is if a Neanderthal is twice as smart as we are, then they would have been a threat to the Dracos. So they went, oh, we won't have that experiment. That went the wrong way. Don't want them too smart. Got to be able to control them. So they created, eventually, Homo sapiens. Not just one, but they created 9 prototypes, and they were all females. XX chromosome. Why would you create all females? Because if you're going to breed, you need females, not males. And in actual fact, you can breed parthenogenically. Now, parthenogenesis is where a female can impregnate herself. And there are numerous species on the planet that practice parthenogenesis, including mammals. And there was a Korean scientist who actually achieved this with human embryos back in 2004. Okay, so you can have parthenogenic stuff going on. And in fact, the female chromosome, just to put us men in our place, and this is very relevant to what I talked about before about the women knowing the toning, knowing the codes in DNA. A Y chromosome is actually a piece removed. Males are incomplete. Deliberately incomplete. Okay? That's a little bit of a side there. So they created 9 prototypes. One with black skin, one with white skin, one with yellow skin, one with red skin, one with blue skin, one with green skin, one with brown skin, and I can't remember the others. And they put them in various places to see which one would develop and be the best vehicle. Then around about 450,000 years ago, there was a race on one of the planets around the brown dwarf. Now, the term Nibiru is often used for that. Now, Nibiru can refer to the planet from which these beings come from, or it can refer to the actual brown dwarf itself, or it can refer to that whole little mini system. They're all sort of interchangeable. The race that was on this planet came to the Earth 450 million years ago, and the Dracos said to them, "We're quite happy for you to come onto this planet to mine your gold and do whatever you want, but we want some of your DNA." Not a problem. So they then genetically engineered the man as we know it now, and they used them to mine gold. And the Dracos were quite happy for this to go along. Because what happens is, within your DNA, you have segments that are reptilian. In fact, your brain, at the top of your stem, the first part of it is reptilian. And then the other bits are tacked on. There's a midbrain, and then it divides into 2 separate brains. The left hemisphere and right hemisphere are separate brains. They work totally independently, and then they work through the causal callosum, I can't remember the exact name of it, which is the part that joins it together. So we are a genetic experiment. And the reason we're a genetic experiment is so that the Dracos can get into the 5th dimension. So they control everything. So let's have a look at, and they're still on the planet. They control many of the lower levels of the underground DUMBs, the deep underground military bases in the US. They control absolutely everything, and they control the Illuminati. They do everything through ritual. Everything is through ritual. So anything that you do, which is ritualistic, is tapping into your reptilian DNA. It's controlling you. You're not controlling it. How many people are aware of Kundalini Yoga or practice Kundalini Yoga? Okay? It's reptilian. The symbology is all reptilian, because you are continually trying to raise your energy up through your spine. If Kundalini Yoga worked, you would do it once and you would attain that level and stay there, and you would have no need to do it again. But what happens? You get pulled back down again. It's like you've got a piece of elastic here, you stretch it up and it gets pulled back down again. Stretch it up, because it's reptilian. The whole energy is based in fear. And if you practice Kundalini Yoga, try this the next time. Project yourself to your highest state to begin with and reach down and pull up. Suddenly you will have no need to do Kundalini Yoga again, because you will already be in that heightened state of awareness. We have a tendency to overcomplicate absolutely everything. Source says there's nothing complicated in the universe. Everything is absolutely simple. But there are levels of complexity. But everything is simple. We are the only creature in the universe that complicates everything. The only creature that does it. So the Dracos have this agenda where they want to get into the 5th dimension, and they're using us as a vehicle to do it. So whenever your energy is locked into any sort of fear, you're operating at 3rd dimensional level, and they can manipulate you and control you. They'll control you through money, because you'll have a fear of not having any, or not having as much as the person next door, or not having a house. And so the minute you're tapped into any sort of material possession, you are addicted to money, which is what they created. And their prime vehicle through which they create and control everything is the Illuminati. I can't even spell it. They control everything through the Illuminati because the people who the Illuminati fall into one of two categories. They are either full-blood reptilians shape-shifted into human form, or they are hybrid reptilians with their agendas.
What's the difference in their agenda? Is there a difference in their agenda?
Their agenda is quite simple. They want to conquer the fifth dimension.
So why does it matter whether they're hybrid or...
No, this is how they control. This is how they control the sheeple through the Illuminati, and they will either be fully reptilian appearing as human because they can shapeshift, or they will be in a hybridized human form. Total reptilian.
Yes. And the Queen.
Queen's a total reptilian. Hillary Clinton's a total reptilian. Yep. They are in every major government position in the world. Every president of the United States going back to Washington has been Illuminati. They are also controlling all of the major religions of the world.
Aren't they the Masons as well?
It's a subgroup.
Same thing, mate.
Yep. You've got the Rosicrucians, you've got the Masons, any sort of formal organisation that has rules of control is Illuminati control.
Have you ever had any personal experiences which confirm all of this? Your experience?
Have you walked around the world? Everything's controlled with rules and regulations. Have I met reptilians in this life? No. That doesn't mean that I'm not meant to. But I've spoken to many people who have. Many people who have. But Crystal, we'll get Crystal to tell you about her experiences when we were in a past life in Egypt, about what was happening to the priestesses in the temples.
You mentioned all the presidents were all Illuminati. Where does Kennedy fit into all this? Because he was trying to expose certain things which he got illuminated.
Yep. Kennedy's father was Illuminati. Total Illuminati. And because of the bloodline, they come through. So he wanted his son to be the president. But it wasn't Jack who was supposed to be the president, it was the older brother who died in the war. So he pushed Jack through, and Robert. But see, both of those saw through the illusion, because there are other aspects, and we'll get into that now. The human form, the human body. Okay, we've got the reptilians in human forms over here. Then we've got what I call Gaia homegrowns. And then over here you've got your star-seeded. And many of you will fall into this category here. The Gaia homegrown consciousness in human bodies is consciousness that has come through Gaia. It's gone through being mineral, it's gone then up through being plant consciousness, it's then gone up through animals and insect, it's gone through the whole hierarchy, which the Buddhists talk about, to get into human body consciousness. And they are homegrown, and most of these people are pretty simple, basic sort of people. We probably all know people who we go, yeah, they don't have a lot of spirituality about them. Okay? That's a really important thing to say, because the star-seeded people are the ones who were invited to this planet to come as healers. So they put their hand up and they said, yes, I'm going to come and I'm going to heal. They came from the Pleiades or Sirius or whatever they bring with them. Now, when you come here, you will partner up with someone from here, because there's no point with you partnering another Pleiadian. Waste of time. So you will connect with people to try to...
Now though, that's actually, that was the case, but now, over the last sort of 10 years, that's actually shifted. So a lot of staff...
Because of what's going to happen.
Actually, yeah, exactly.
Yes, they're regrouping because they know it's time to leave.
Yeah.
They've done their work.
Definitely.
Okay. You will find someone who needs to learn about unconditional love and do everything to try to get it to them, and they just won't get it. So then you move on, you find another one. So, well, I'll try and find another one. And that's exactly what the healers do, whatever it is you do. And that's why you've chosen to come here.
Would a healer ever attempt to heal
hybrid.
Look, no. From the people I've spoken to, they have a knee-jerk reaction to them straight away, and they don't have anything to do with them. Because you can't heal these people. They have.
Cold-blooded.
They're cold-blooded. Yeah, you're not going to be able to heal them, so therefore you suddenly go, no, I'm not going to go there. So you just stay away from them. So no, I don't know of any star-seeded people who've tried to heal reptilians.
Did those people mentioned in the book, an old ancient book, the Keys of Enoch, these star-seeded people?
Oh, look, you get them referred to left, right and centre in all of the ancient religions.
Now I've got a placement for them, yeah.
But they're not necessarily the Anunnaki. Okay? There are people in this room that come from different star seeds who have come here to help. And here's the interesting thing. There are a lot of light workers who are praying, doing a lot of spiritual work to prevent these earth changes from happening. Okay? Not allowed to. You're not allowed to. You are not allowed to interfere with the free will of Gaia. The light workers who are doing that are caught up in their own ego. I'm the brilliant doctor who can heal all. Okay? Let's say all the life forms consciousnesses on Gaia. Amoebas, ants, fish, birds, animals, you name it. Add them all up. Now put the human consciousness in. Where do we fall? Nowhere. We're less than 0.00001% of the consciousness on this planet. And in terms of Gaia, an ant has as much of a vote as a human, as a life force. So Gaia and all of the life forces on this planet saw a half a dozen cells deciding they were going to do their own thing. What do we call that? We call it cancer. And we get rid of it because it's detrimental. Gaia has an agreement with the sun and this solar system to have a cycle of cleansing that comes through every period and a culling of this 100% of human consciousness, and I'm not talking about the starseeder, because a lot of these people say it's going to be a smooth transition and you're just going to be able to ascend. Of course it is for them, because they can just shift back into their star consciousness whenever they want. Not a problem. So they'll do it. But they're trying to tell these people that they can do it too, and that the events aren't going to happen. So they're all praying against the free will of Gaia. Not allowed to happen. Not allowed to happen. But here's the interesting thing. A small percentage of the human consciousness have been able to deactivate the reptilian DNA that's in them, which keeps them locked in fear, and step up to create something quite extraordinary. And the Galactic Federation, fifth dimensional beings, etc., think that's extraordinary. And so they are coming here en masse to support and witness it, the transition. But for this transition to happen, there has to be a majority rule. Well, if this is 100,000 people, and that's me being generous, against 6 million, and you need 51% to get a democratic vote, how are you going to get that? Sorry?
Clean it up.
Clean it up. By wiping out this and just helping these ones get across the line. That's what Gaia's going to do. Those who are ready, those who are open, and that's the role of the light workers, is to help these people become aware, not to help these people. Is to help these people come aware so that they can make the transition. And then there's going to be a roundtable discussion in the Galactic Federation as to whether the human consciousness is allowed to do that. And we're being told that they'll be put into a quarantine for a period of time to see how they go. Because they're not all convinced. Not 100% convinced. So the key here is this Dracos stuff. Because within your DNA, there are segments that are reptilian. And while they are activated, the reptilians can control you. Have any of you heard of the Montauk experiments that were going on in the US? They were manipulating people using frequencies. Mind games. You know the guy that just blew all these people away in... Harp's a different thing. The guy who blew all the people away he was a Freemason and he'd been in the States. And so he was one of these people that's been subjected to this. And they use these people to propagate fear.
They said Martin Bryant was one.
Martin Bryant was another one.
Yeah.
If you look into his history, he actually wasn't the one who did that, by the way. There was someone else who did that.
What about the
He was a
WikiLeaks
scapegoat.
guy?
Yeah.
What's his name? The WikiLeaks guy?
Julian Assange.
Julius Assange, look, he's a whistleblower. He's a whistleblower. He's another person who wants the truth out there. Okay? So the key here is, where do we fit in? Okay, we know who's behind this all. The Dracos through the Illuminati and their building of underground bunkers and manipulating everything. They're the ones who are trying to control us all like puppets. But there are aspects of us that come from the higher fifth dimensional realm. And the higher fifth dimensional realm are quite happy for this to happen. Because they understand it's just a play. It's just, you need to have fear at the third dimension. They totally understand it. So they're not stopping it from happening, because they understand about free will. Where do we fit in? And that's where I'm going to bring Crystal in here. Because we have to be able to deactivate all of our reptilian stuff and make sure that all of our other bits are fully switched on. So that's who behind it, the why we've given to you. So I'm now going to ask Crystal to come in. And she's going to take you through the spiritual aspects of it so that you get a full thing, not just the physical stuff. I've given you sort of the stuff that everyone's going to want the proof for. Okay? Now we're going into the stuff that you can't prove because it's in your heart. So I shall hand you over to Crystal.
As you know, my name is Crystal, and I'm going to briefly talk to you about my journey, just very briefly. Very much like Alex, my journey began as well as a child wide open. I had a very strong connection to the Diva Kingdom. The gnomes that are called cuckoos, they were looking after me, and my parents could go anywhere. I said, oh, the cuckoos will look after me, I'm fine. So a strong connection to the elves as well, and just that whole nature kingdom. And then I shut it down. For whatever reason, conditioning, even though my parents were quite open, I shut it down. And went into full-on masculine ways of needing to achieve things. So because I'd been taught or conditioned that if I'm a good girl, if I'm achieving things, I'm going to be rewarded and I'm going to get love. So my way of thinking that I'm going to get love was to get approval in the world, was to become a high achiever. So I did a lot of things, and you name it, I've been always incredibly busy, completely buying into the masculine world. Which I call it, because these are masculine principles, competition, the need to prove ourselves, because what's behind it is fear. And if you remember what Alex was talking about, in the very beginning he drew the circle, this being source, this being all love, and then he drew this circle here. In order to experience himself, Source needed to create the absence of himself, which is fear. Did you talk about the three? No? Okay. So if we're just love, if we're just in a state of love, which is our natural state, how do we know what it is? How do we experience it as anything but? Because if we're like ill, now if we're always healthy, we don't know what it means to be ill. We don't appreciate what we have in our health. So it's the same with this, it's the same with love. If we don't know anything else, how can we appreciate ourselves as being love? So we choose to go into this third dimensional illusion of duality to experience all the emotions that we have, and all the facets of fear and all the facets of love. And that's what I bought into, completely and utterly, until I realized that wasn't getting me anywhere. I was being all things to all people, trying very hard, but really wasn't happy inside of here. So then I realized this is where I needed to get back to. I needed to simplify my life. I needed to stop needing to be liked. And I just needed to just speak my truth and be who I am. So I experienced the fear, and now it was about me getting back into the love state. And this is the journey. Some people may know that there's 7 chakras, and others may know that there's 13. And the 13 are just aspects. There's 1 at the base, 2 at sacrum, 3 in the solar plexus, 1 in heart, 2 here, 3 here, and again 1. And the 3 here is what I'm going to talk about, because we can all know, first we know things, then we experience things in order to have an awareness of things. So here we're just all knowing. So it's the intellectual understanding, the intellectual knowing, and a lot of people I know are doing what's called spiritual intellect, have their spirituality in their head. And I was one of them. I knew everything, I understood everything, but I hadn't experienced it. So this is where I'm now going back into and helping other women also or generally everybody to get back into that feminine, which is what we need at this point. It's the women who need to now step forward to embracing their feminine essence, their being in heart, and creating communities where we can work together as a collective so that we can prepare for those changes. Because look where patriarchal society has gotten us. And this is nothing against men or advocating females or not putting men down. It's simply a fact. The masculine aspect within all of us is fear-based. So we need to prove things. We need to be out there for ourselves. The feminine knows that there is inclusion and every perspective is valid. And so the 3 aspects is the seeing something, then it's an experience of it, and in order for us then to know it, to fully have an awareness of it. So I use my crystal to demonstrate that. Each one, our human perspective is one side of the crystal. This is, I can't see what you can see there. So I might say, well, mine is really smooth. And you say, no, it's ruffled. And so we each see something different. But it's all part of the same truth. Because if we shift our perspective to that highest point here, all is true. And this goes very much about, the reaction to the events that Alex was talking about that are to come. We all have filters through which we hear what is being presented to us. Some will say, and the majority of the population is in denial about it. I'm saying, I don't have time for this crap. My life is going well, thank you very much. I'm too busy. I don't want to talk about it. Others say, well, at least I have an awareness of it. If I have an awareness of it, what can we do about it? I might as well die, but at least I have an awareness. That's another filter. And then there's the people who prepare. Then there's the people like the light workers who say, well, no, we're bringing out this fear. And in bringing out this fear in people, the core fear, we're actually affecting what's going to happen because it's a cause and effect thing. So more people buying into the fear, the more people are going to be affected, and the more we're creating a bad event. That's one filter as well. Because from a different perspective, again, we could say, well, isn't it important that we understand where that we have this fear? Wouldn't we much rather know what's within us so that we can dissolve it and release it rather than pushing it under the carpet? Because if we know it, we can move through it. And that's the key. So what I want to do is I want to firstly give you an understanding of why you are here personally. Why have you chosen to incarnate at this time where all these things are going to happen? Have you chosen to incarnate to simply experience moving over into another dimension, experiencing a death that could be perhaps quite traumatic? Death, because it is an illusion as well. Or have you chosen to be here in order to prepare? Are you a leader that wants to help other people to get into their heart about this, fully aware and saying, yes, this is going to happen and this is what I choose to do? Are you somebody who's going to rebuild? What is your role? Are you somebody who's simply going to hold space? Simply holding love, being the eye in the storm, that silence in the storm where everything around is going haywire? Are you somebody who's going to look after the children because they need to stay innocent? Are you somebody who's a very practical guy, you know, who's like a masculine, who says, right, I'm going to rebuild. This is what we've got to do. We've got to dig a bunker. We've got to have concrete above us. This is what we've got to do. What is your role? So I'm going to guide you through a meditation where you're going to get in touch with your higher self and perhaps remember what that role is for you. Because the key throughout all of this is that we are going through the 5 stages of grieving in one way or another with this. And are you familiar with the 5 stages? No. I'll just briefly run you through them. So firstly, there's the denial. This can't happen. This is far too big. This is crazy. You know, what's he talking about? This can't happen. This is too big. Denial. Then comes the anger. And in one of our lectures, we had a lady who initially wrote on the website. Actually, I'll talk to you through them first. So there's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And in one of our lectures, somebody said, you've forgotten a stage. There are 6 stages. There's the excitement afterwards. Once we've accepted it, it's the excitement. Because if we have chosen to incarnate at this time, we must be pretty advanced scriptwriters because we want to have drama in our lives. And I don't know if Alex spoke to you about the scriptwriter idea of that before we incarnate, we decide what we want to experience in our lives. So we write that script and we find the actors up here that can help us fulfill that script. And then we incarnate and we play it out. We become the actor. And most people forget that in becoming the actor, we forget that we were the scriptwriter as well. Because we're getting too attached to just one side. We forget everything else. We forget that perspective. So it's about remembering at this time the perspective of the higher self. What is your purpose and what have you chosen to create in this life? What have you chosen to experience? So, for example, if you've chosen to experience love, you would need to create the absence of love. So what you would incarnate in would be a family where there might be a lot of domestic violence, sexual abuse, just anything that is anything but love. Or joy, similar thing, or you want to experience health. So you incarnated into a body that's very ill. And the problem is, or the challenge is that we attach to those things. So once we've been sexually abused, once we've had traumas happening in our lives, once we've felt rejected, we attach to those emotions and we project them forward into the future. And so we almost anticipate that that's going to happen again, right? Because that's what our past experience was. So the key is to not attach, because only then, and by knowing what the purpose is, by going back to that higher perspective, can we then remember for what purpose we chose to experience those things. So the more ups and downs you have in your life, the more advanced the soul you are, the more advanced the scriptwriter you are. There was a lady in one of the seminars and she put on Alex's website an attack of, I need some proof, what you're saying is outrageous, where's your evidence? This was before the lecture, so there was her denial, first stage. After the lecture, she wrote another email. Thank you for ruining my life. Thanks very much for the awareness you've given me. This is all crap. I had a perfectly beautiful life and now I've got all this awareness and going around in my head. Thanks very much. Anger. I don't know about her bargaining stage, but on the way home she also said that she cried. On the way home from the lecture, she was in her car going to a birthday party of her grandson crying. I've got all this awareness now. What am I going to do with it? How can I be happy for him? Depression. And that's a good thing. These emotions, because we've come here to have these emotions, to experience what it feels like, to have this variety. And other beings from other dimensions, they look at us and thinking, wow, there's such richness. And look what we've created with it. Music, dramas, films, incredibly beautiful things. or because of these ups and downs of emotions. So they're not to be ignored. And all of you are going to be at one stage or another with these emotions in those 5 stages. And my aim is to give you an understanding of an experience of going back up here, going to that 5th stage, give you an experience right now of what that feels like, so that in the couple of days to come, you will be able to remember that. And still accept those fears, because I liken it to a water balloon. You know, if you have a water balloon, you're in the pool, and you don't want anybody to see that you've got this balloon, you try and push it down on the surface. It takes a lot of energy because it kind of comes up somewhere else again, doesn't it? And you try and push it down again, it comes up somewhere else, and you're spending all this energy suppressing these emotions that you don't have any time and energy to plan. So accept these emotions, celebrate them, live them, honor them, and move through them. Don't attach to them. Does that make sense? And that's really key. And I know it's easier said than done, but if you can remember that, that would be fantastic. My dad passed away 2 years ago, and that was in Germany, so I didn't fly to the funeral. A couple of weeks later, I went into the cinema, and there was a film playing about a Japanese ceremony of cremation and how the rituals that they do. I felt I was at my dad's funeral. I was crying, but I was at a date at the same time. So this was a bit weird. You know, I was grieving for my father's passing over, and I was having this date. And I noticed myself needing and wanting to have a shoulder to cry on and lean on. But that wasn't our agreement. We were there to have fun. So realizing that my inner child needed something, and she needed to be assured, and she needed love, I took myself off, excused myself, took myself to the toilet, allowed myself to cry for 5 minutes, just let it all out, and then I talked to my inner child. And I told her that she was still loved. I told her everything that you would tell a little child that was crying when she's upset about something. And I put my hands on my heart, and I felt her, and I kind of held her like this. And then I cleaned up my face and went down again, and we had a great night. So I honored my emotions. I expressed them, I let them go, and I carried on what I needed to do. So if you can remember that story when you're getting into one of those phases, maybe that might be able to help you to honor it and move through it very quickly. So let's go into why you are here. So what I'd like you to do is just put down all your pens and papers. So just put your hands not open like you would normally in a meditation, but downwards, because it's like you're giving yourself the energy. This is all about you. The receiving, just trust that the receiving will still come into you and through your hands into your body. So I'd just like you to close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Feeling your body on the chair and your feet on the floor. And just deepening and lengthening your breath. I just want you to imagine, to open the soles of your feet and connecting your energy to the heart of the earth, to the heart of Mother Gaia. Whatever you visualize in the heart of the center of the earth to be. It could be a flower, it could be a crystal, it could be a heart, whatever it is for you. And there is no right or wrong. So whatever you get throughout this meditation, throughout this visualization, is perfectly right for you. And if you don't get anything, just pretend, just make it up. So feeling the connection to the earth, feeling her energy merging with yours, bringing it into your body and through your body up, through the crown of your head, to the cosmic mother, to all that is, to source, your higher self, God consciousness. And just feeling that sense of oneness, connecting above and below, expanding, opening your heart, being fully present in the now. And I want you to visualize being in a beautiful natural setting, your favorite place in nature. This could be at the beach, in a beautiful meadow, or in the forest. And just notice in the distance a figure appearing, a being. And this being has an incredibly powerful energy. Just notice her or his walk and the qualities that this being has. Incredible sense of love, personal power, wisdom, grace, whatever else there is for you. And just watch this being approaching you, coming closer and closer. And just see her or him with your heart, not just with your eyes. Feel this being as it approaches you. And now you're standing eye to eye, looking into his or her eyes, right into the soul. And this being has a message for you. And it's whispering in your ear why you are here right now, why you have chosen to incarnate at this point in time. What is your purpose? Are you here to prepare for the shift? Are you here to rebuild after? Or are you here to observe it from outer space? And what specifically is your role if you are here to rebuild or to prepare? What have you come here for? And now thank the being. Maybe he or she has given you words, maybe just a feeling, whatever it is perfectly perfect. And just give him or her a big embrace. Connecting your hearts, merging, becoming one. Feeling the feelings, feeling the beingness of this being, seeing the world through his or her eyes, experiencing that strength and power, that stillness, that courage, that love, and whatever else there is for you. Being one. And notice how good that feels. And now visualize that there is a cockpit, like of an airplane. You're going to walk in, it's your personal plane, and you're the pilot. And there's lots of switches and flickers and lots of wires going off everywhere. Some are big, some are small, some are colourful, some are grey or brown or dark black. Just have a good look around there. This is your DNA. It's the control room of your DNA. And your DNA, of course, being the blueprint of who you are. It's got recorded in it all of your life's experiences, all of your ancestors' lives' experiences, and all the experiences you've had in alternate or past lives. It's all there, right in front of you. So have a good look around. And I would like you to see all the switches that have reptilian DNA in it activated, all those wires, and have a look at what they look like. Maybe they're scaly, maybe they're green, maybe they're brown. Are they really thick? How many are there? Are they really alive? Are they pumping juice through them? What's happening with them? What do they look like? I'd like you to take a good note of them, and if it feels right for you, deactivate them by flicking the switch from on to off. And notice what's happening. Maybe they're shriveling. Maybe they're shrinking, reducing in size or color. What's happening to them? And again, if you can't see anything, just make it up, just pretend. And if you like, just follow them all the way through your body, and you might just rip the whole thing out, and you might also like to roll them up like a film roll and put them into your reference library. Or you might just let them go back to where they came from. Whatever feels right for you. When you've done that, just have another look at your control panel. See if there are any hiding wires that maybe you haven't seen at first glance. Sometimes they can be very sneaky. Just see if there are any of those or any other things that you would like to flick off. Fear, need to control, need to be attached to emotions, anger, depression. Just go ahead and flick those switches off. And notice how it changes. Notice how suddenly there's more room because they're shrinking and shriveling, and you're taking them out and either storing them in the library or just letting them go into the ether, away, back to where they came from. Because you have experienced what it feels like to live with that fear, and now is the time to let that go. Because you know it, you've experienced it. So there's no need to attach. So if there are any switches that have attachment, any attachment switches, just go ahead and flick them off as well. And know that you can come back there anytime. And now for the exciting part. What I'd like you to do is look at all the switches and all those patterns and panels that have love, strength, courage, abundance, awareness written on them. What do they look like? Are they on full? Are they on half? Are they off? And just go ahead and just turn them on full and see what happens. Notice new juice, new energy moving through them. Taking up all the spaces that you've cleared. And follow them through your body. And notice what they're doing. There might be tingling, there might be an opening, an expansion. And when you've done that, just become aware again of who you are in all of you, who, not just in your human self, but in this beautiful state, being merged with all of who you are, being merged with your higher self. Just again feeling, being that being. And allowing it to just expand in your being, using the breath to do this, fully connecting with that. And come back to the natural setting that you're in, your beautiful space in nature. Feeling the shifts in your body, or noticing what's different, what's the same. And then becoming aware of being in this room, staying connected to all of who you are. Maybe wriggling your toes and your feet and your hands, having a bit of a stretch, and in your own time, opening your eyes. And just trust that whatever you needed to get, you got. Even if you couldn't follow the whole thing. And how are you feeling now? Did some of you feel a shift or more clarity? A lot lighter. Yes. Because we have a choice. If we go to that higher perspective, this is who we are. We are that lightness. So whenever we get bogged down with these emotions, we can just doing that. And you don't have to take half an hour to do it. You can sometimes just maybe even just touch your heart, remember that vision, and that lightness will come back. So this is one of the preparations of how you can prepare for the changes on an emotional level, because knowing that emotionally it can be a roller coaster, so it's about acknowledging that and shifting back to the spiritual perspective of things that can help you to maintain your calm and go about things the way you want to. And maybe even that childlike innocence, that childlike excitement, because children don't have any good or bad. They don't know what's right or wrong. They're just exploring the world and they're getting surprised at being told off. So just tapping back into that inner child as we're preparing for these changes would be a really, really helpful thing. So that's the spiritual and emotional preparation. Mental preparation, simply visualize exactly how you choose to respond to those events when they happen. Imagine what you'll do when the ground is shaking. Imagine what you'll do and how you'll respond when people are suddenly coming to you because they heard you talk about it, asking for help. Visualizing yourself being the eye of the storm, that calm center. And running this through your mind over and over, because in doing so, what you're doing, you're creating new neural pathways. Scientifically, it's proven that if we are in an alpha state and we visualize things, we can change our neural pathways into something as if we've already experienced it. And wouldn't that be a great thing if you react to these events as if you've done it 1,000,000 times over already? I used to prepare for public speaking like this. I used to visualize exactly how I wanted to feel. And when things went wrong, I would still be calm. So it really does work. And there's an experiment by a football team as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They've divided the team. One half was going to play on the field and the other half was playing in their mind, training the same amount of hours. And guess which team would win when they came back after a week? Yeah, the visualization ones. Do you know why?
Because they prepared what they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. They had no evidence of failure. They never got it wrong in their mind. They always got it right. So their neural pathways were very strongly geared towards getting it right. So it's incredibly powerful. So if you choose to do that, I invite you to maybe 5 times a day, practicing, visualizing exactly how you choose to be. And there's another thing, and Source always says there's no good in meditating for an hour a day. It's the moment by moment that we really want to experience. So he says 5 times for 5 minutes. So if you can, go into your heart 5 times for 5 minutes a day, simply connecting to all of who you are, feeling that lightness, feeling that love in your heart, remembering that this is who you are love. So experiencing that for 5 minutes, 5 times a day would be an incredibly powerful thing to do. Again, because there's very small, there's only a couple of hours between those 5 minutes, 5 times a day, in which you will remember and you will strengthen that way of being if you're not already doing that. And with that, I'd like to invite Alex back to talk a little bit about the physical preparations. And just be very consciously aware that as you're hearing how to prepare, that you stay in the space that you're in right now. It's a great exercise to keep that lightness up. So with that, I'll hand over again.
If any of you are like me, I tried meditation once. Couldn't do it. There was so much going on in my mind, and I tried many, many times to get it happening, and it just wouldn't work. And I had this voice in saying to me, that's not the way, it's not the way, it's not the way. And eventually when Source started to connect to me, he explained to me why. He said, people are meditating to try and clear their thoughts. He said, but every thought comes from Source. So when they're trying to clear their mind, they're then trying to fill it with thoughts from Source, from God. So they're sort of defeating the purpose. And he said the purpose is to be out in the middle of everything and be calm. Not to go off and be calm and be away from everything and then to come back into the world and go, oh my God, I can't deal with it, I need to go and meditate. So the thing is, no, you need to be in that state and you need to be in the middle of the hurricane all the time. And I think Osho talks about it a lot. For those of you who are familiar with Osho, is that every moment is a meditation. And that idea about, if you have trouble meditating or connecting, just go into your mind and visualize what you want. It's like, what do I want for Christmas? Yeah, visualize it. Because your thoughts are powerful because they're totally reflecting the whole creation of the universe. It's all thought. Everything is thought. It's a good, useful exercise. It will work. It's like a tennis player. If you're pretty crap at tennis and a coach shows you how to hit the ball properly, you need to practice. You need to go out and you need to practice and practice and practice. And that little 5 minutes a day thing, everyone can do that. In terms of what we need to do physically, obviously there's going to be big changes and we need to do a lot of planning and preparation. Basically, you need to find somewhere out of the sun that's going to have a certain amount of thickness of preparation. There's a great book here, Planet X Forecast, the 2012 Survival Guide. I think I've put it on the sheets of paper. There's a lot of information in there about what to do. Some of the information about, this was written in 2007, and the information about Nibiru is not quite correct in terms of its orbit and the timings and everything, but certainly in terms of the preparations, and it's got a lot of information that comes from the Kolkan Bible and the Egyptians backing it up. So I don't go into a lot of the information because what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to point you in that direction. If you want to do the research for yourself, here are some places to go to get you started. It's about getting the picture to you. I don't have time. If I covered all of this, it would be a 12-hour lecture. We don't have the time to do that. It's to give you the nuts and bolts. So that's a good one to get into. If you want to know more about the Dracos and the agendas and everything, David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret, is probably the best book out there about exposing them.
When was that one written?
David's,
it's about 10 years old, I think.
Can I just say that David Icke's actually coming out as well. He's on in Melbourne in October the 8th. Shit, I'll pay for those tickets.
So in terms of the planning, yes, you need to find a safe place. It needs to be somewhere away from the coast. Melbourne will be underwater before there anyway because of the tidal flooding and everything. But you need to get away from the coast. You're going to need to find somewhere where you can store ahead of schedule at least 6 months' supply of drinking water, bottled drinking water. You can't rely on streams or underground artesian springs or something like that because the artesian spring may well be polluted by the acid rain. So you can't rely on that. If you have it as a bonus, fantastic. You're going to need at least 6 months' supply of food, and you can find these lists on the web. The Mormons apparently have a fantastic one. You're going to need simple things like firewood, because there's going to be no fuel to burn. All the trees will have been burnt down. So you need to store firewood. You need warm clothing. You need basic vitamins and medicines and all those sorts of things. You're going to need seeds to plant afterwards. And those seeds are going to have to be very highly tolerant in terms of acidic soils. Or you're going to need to have something, what did they say the other night? A dolomite, which will correct the balance of the soil again. Lots of things you're going to need. There's going to be a bit of a nuclear winter for a time afterwards because of all of the ash that's up in the clouds and everything. It'll take a while to settle back down again. But it's like a testing period for us to get through that 8 or 9 months so that the culling makes sure that those of us who are truly understanding why we're here go through. Okay? We've covered a lot of territory tonight. The preparation that you have to do more than anything else is in your heart. And as we say to you, don't believe a word we tell you. But if it resonates with you, enough for you to start doing your own confirmation. And you're going to find a lot of people out there who have different opinions. There are going to be a lot of people who go, oh, I don't believe all that crap. Crystal's brother's a perfect example. And he quotes, in every time we send him information, he will send us somebody who totally denies it all. No factual evidence to support it, just somebody who denies it. That's his proof of denial that this guy says it's not true. Okay, and there's a lot of that up. You have to interpret the data through your own filter, through your own heart, what resonates with you. And the best way to do that is get into your highest aspect of perspective. Do not attach to fear-based things. Find your own truth in this. Okay? I want to make sure that when we finish here, we are at the highest perceptive state that we can be at for ourselves. And each of you will fluctuate backwards and forwards. Expect to be tested over the next week or two. If you've had a reaction, how many people when they heard some of this stuff at some point tonight went, oh shit, fear? How many people were or still are in the denial stage, I don't believe any of it? Great. Fantastic. How many people have already started bargaining, thinking, well, I could do this, or, you know, why couldn't I do that? Or, they're starting to play this against that. Maybe? Yeah? How many people have got to the depression stage? Oh, shit. Yeah, that's a good one to get to. It's like, oh, shit. Oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. Because the next stage is to say, well, okay, what if it is true? What if I just accept it? What if I just go, okay, how many people have insurance on their house? Why?
The bank demands it. They don't give me credit.
Yeah, because they're tying you into their system. They're tying into their fear-based system. But most people think, oh, I better get it in case the house burns down. But if we gave them advance warning that their house was going to go down, going to be burnt down, they'd go, oh, great, I'll move all my stuff out beforehand. They start planning. So the secret is, okay, if it's going to happen, what would I do? Where would I go? Would I have a plan of action? Because you are being gifted information that 99.999999% of the world's population won't get in time. You're being gifted time to plan. Some of you won't act. Some of you will wait until you get confirmation. Well, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and see what happens. Oh yeah, well there was an earthquake. Yeah, well there was an earthquake, but it's not exactly where he said it was going to be. And that there was flooding in that city, but it wasn't as bad as he said it was going to be. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer. It's the person who sits on the train track and everyone says, "Get off! There's a train coming." I can't see it. Where? Well, you're not looking in the right direction. Well, I'll just stay here. But can't you hear it coming? Oh, but that could be on another track. It's like deflect, 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 deflect. Most people are going to be hit and it's too late to do anything.
When's that day?
There's several. I can't tell you exact date, But I can tell you that when the financial collapse happens, all hell break loose because money will cease to exist.
So the anarchy, right?
Total anarchy. You will not be able to access your bank account because the bank will have disappeared.
Super goes.
All your superannuation goes.
So
You'll not be able to
get
get money
cash
out of the bank.
basically.
Look, I can't tell you what to do, but if I was in your position, cash will be useful for a certain period of time.
Keep it somewhere in your...
Okay? But what will happen is when the financial crisis happens, those people who do not have cash will go, oh shit, because you won't be able to go to the bank to take it out. And you won't be able to make transactions because your bank has gone into receivership and doesn't exist. So the only people... Yes. If I was in your position, I would be taking as many loans from as many banks as I could because they're all owned by the Illuminati anyway.
Yeah, I know that.
Get big credit cards.
You know what should happen? The water should go over there. The water should go over there where all the governments are.
Well, look, things are going to happen to them. You know, it's too many people worry about what's going to happen to the Illuminati, you know, and building their bankers and doing all of that. I'm not concerned about them. What's going to happen to them is going to happen to them. What I'm concerned about is what's going to happen to me. I know what's going to happen to me. And my next step is that you know where you're going to be. People have asked me, so where am I going to be? I said, it doesn't matter where I'm going to be. It's where you're going to be that matters. And if you really want to know, we'll tell you later about what's going to happen.
What happened in Japan and New Zealand, especially Japan, I saw on TV where all the water was coming. There would have been people living in the houses, and they would have no warning.
Oh yeah, there's footage of them running, trying to get away from it. No warning.
It's and the government doesn't want you to know because otherwise they have to insure them and pay for them.
Yeah.
So they'd rather those people be dead, so they have to pay for them.
Do you know when that first hit? Did you all see the footage of the nuclear reactors exploding? Yeah. Okay. Straight away, they went into meltdown. All 6 of them went into meltdown straight away. And what did they tell you? No, it's everything's fine. It's going to do this. And then 2 days later, well, there's been a slight leak, and then bit by bit, they tell you, but they've all gone. They're a mess. It's a total mess.
There was a lecture on YouTube. I think you can find it. There's a doctor. She's Australian, I believe, who sort of went out and explained basically what's happened ever since that meltdown.
Yes.
How we're pretty much already being affected by.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, totally. You know the Gulf. You know the Gulf leak that happened in the Gulf of Mexico. You know how they say that it's all field. There wasn't one pipe that went. They'd fractured the whole floor. There were up to 20 fractures in the seafloor there. And you know how they're saying that there's no oil leaking? Do you know why there's no oil leaking at the surface? Because they have put a chemical through the whole water that causes the oil to seep to the bottom of the floor. It's killed the whole Gulf of Mexico. It's still leaking. But all the oil that's coming up, this chemical is causing it to fall to the floor. So they're lying. That's okay. I'm more concerned for you guys that you have the information. Okay, it's all about truth. We all have a right to the truth, and the governments are not telling us. There's a group called 2012australia.com.au. You can contact them. They are preparing. They were originally working on the December 2012 date, and we've passed on the information to them, and they're having a massive rethink because they're having to accelerate everything. There are survival groups. We're going to put together an email list, and those of you who want to be on it can form a group, and you can work as a community if you want to plan now, and it's the best way to do it. We also have groups in Koroit and groups in Albury, so you can communicate with them, and there's no reason why the people here couldn't say, well, Albury's going to be fairly safe up there, where are you guys going? You don't want to be in a major city. You want to be as far from a major city as possible. And Albury is a major city. So you don't want to be in Albury, but they're planning to go elsewhere.
Strategically, where would be one of the best places in Australia to go?
I can draw you a map.
What about Europe?
A lot of Europe will be underwater because a lot of it's low-lying.
Including Greece?
Yeah. Well, all the volcanoes are going to go. Look, there is time. There are people who are digging holes and they're getting containers and they're putting containers in there, covering the containers in soil and decking them out. And there's time to do that, and it's not an expensive proposition.
I wanted to say one thing to interrupt that. People who can't afford containers, I've worked out a way to build a cheap one. That's recycling car tyres and building a dig hole. Build and just dig a big hole and use car tyres as your walls.
Wow.
So that's the way
That's the sort of information that when you get together as a group that you can email backwards and forwards. I would suggest if those of you who feel that you want to take some sort of action would perhaps want to meet once a week and form like a committee of management. It's the best way to get things happening. Just let me show you quickly how much of Australia will be left. There's Tasmania. A small part of Tasmania in the northwest part will be left, and this part here of Australia. The rest will be underwater.
What's that? Where's that?
Can you show the
From the top of the Great Dividing Range down through, up through the northern part of Victoria, New South Wales, all the coastal areas here will all be gone. They'll all be underwater. And it's very hard to be exact because when all of these changes happen, some parts of the earth will lift and others will fall. So if I say to you, well, look, that part by the current map is 1,500 metres high, so that'll be safe, it could go down.
It's a volcanic room. It's like a permanent uplift, isn't it? Yeah. That's the map. For the next...
There will be some slight movement as it all settles down, but the map is going to totally change. It'll be upside down and continents will have shifted here, there and everywhere and stuff will have lifted. It's going to be very different. Hang on, just one time. Antarctica all the ice will go from it and it'll come into a more temperate zone.
That's what they said at Melbourne University years ago about Antarctica, about Melbourne.
Yeah, so there's lots of changes.
It's quite fascinating. I've been in South America a few months ago, and it's a lot of people buying land around Patagonia. But about a lot of people with a lot of money buying a lot of land and bringing everyone around.
If you want to know the safest place to be, buy land next to the Denver airport, because that's where Queen Elizabeth's buying land.
Denver airport?
Denver airport's a mile high, and they've got a huge, massive underground base underneath the whole airport.
Just wanted to mention one thing as well. The question of money came up, and some people don't have money but they have time. Other people have money to buy something but don't have the time to do anything with it. So this is where the community comes in. This is where we need to shift our perspective, our thinking, and really work together and see, okay, here's the group of people that really want to do something. What skills do you have? What resources do you have? And really getting together in that way, working as a whole. It's service to others, not service to self. So people with no money have other valuable tools that they can offer the community.
So let me just tie up the money because it was left a bit open-ended. The banks will totally collapse. All financial systems will collapse. You will not be able to get money out of an account, nor will you be able to pay any bills from an account. Okay? This is part of the legislation that Obama passed after the last one, that they can't bail out any big corporations anymore. It's part of their setup. They fixed a loophole.
That would include, like, even money that you've had there for years.
Yep. Anything that is electronically stored will go. It's the beginning of September. The only thing that will be, please, the only thing that you will have will be cash money, and it will only be valuable until anarchy rules.
What about telecommunication?
All be going down. Down. Okay, it's all going to go. All going to go. Does anyone have any other questions about anything that we've presented tonight? If the financial meltdown happens at the beginning of September, and they will trigger it when people start to react to what's going on. At the minute people start to get distracted and go, whoa, well, what's going on? Bang, they'll do it. Because they're distracting them to something that's worse.
Is Greece the start of all of this?
Greece, Italy, Spain.
Right.
They're setting them up. No, that's the setup. They're setting it up.
Yeah.
They're setting it up.
Yeah.
And the US is the other one, because you know they're all tottering on the brink of being bankrupt.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're saying, oh no, we'll extend it for another 2 weeks, because they're going to extend it as long as they can until people know the truth.
Yeah. Can I ask something?
Yep.
You said something interesting earlier. You said that the reptilians, the Draco, basically empower themselves through our fear. Yeah? And if that's the job of the Illuminati, then why are they not out there spreading fear based on this sort of stuff now?
Because if they told you the truth about this, you wouldn't go to work, you wouldn't pay your bills, and anarchy would rule and they wouldn't be able to control you. Because at the moment, there is enough people that if they all stood up against the government, including the police and the army, etc., they could turn around and take charge. So they don't want anarchy yet, but they want to keep you in fear. So they keep you in fear with putting media reports out about how there was a rape in your street and then there was a shooting here, and all the news is all bad news to tell you how bad the world is, to keep you in fear. But they don't want you to know the truth, because if you knew the truth, you would then go for them. They don't want you going for them. They want to keep you in the dark.
So by going for them, you mean raising your awareness to combat that fear?
Well, physically, if enough people on the planet realised that the Rockefellers and the presidents and all this, we would suddenly go en masse and we would throw out the governments, we would seize all the bases and we would do all of that, and their plans would be screwed. So the best way that they do that is keep you in the dark.
But Greece has tried to do that. The people of Greece have tried to do that, and they keep them suppressed by throwing money at them, saying it's all okay.
That's right. That's how they do it. They did it in Saudi Arabia. They all rebelled, and then the prince or the king went, I'll give you all a 15% pay rise. And they went, oh, okay. See, they're all locked into. Here's the key thing. I'll just get to you in a moment. If you have any sort of attachment or addiction, you will not be able to make the transition. That includes physical addictions too. Sugar, caffeine, nicotine, any forms of drugs. Any sort of physical substance that you put into your body which is addictive, you won't be able to make it. If you have any sort of emotional attachments, baggage to fears and, oh, he hurt me and I'm, any sort of emotional baggage, you won't make it. If you have any attachments to people, now that might seem really callous, but here's the thing. My beautiful boy over there, I'm not attached to. I just experience love because of him. If he shifts into another dimension and passes over at this stage, that's his choice. I'm not attached to it. But it doesn't mean I can't be in a state of love all the time. And that's the key.
Because that's what I was going to say. With all this, that is my fear. I've got two little boys. And with all that going on, I look at them and think, oh my God, what have I brought you into?
No. They chose. They chose to come here. And they will have more awareness than you will at the moment.
You mentioned that death is also just a transition, or it's an illusion.
It's just an illusion, just the same as life is an illusion.
So if we're in the right state, we can just deal with it.
You'll enjoy it. It's like a roller coaster ride. You can sit there and be scared shitless, or you can go, wow! And if you watch roller coasters, who are the people who are scared on roller coasters? The old people. Because the younger ones are just going, this is fun, this is great. Because they haven't learned to be fearful.
So what's the point in doing all this to protect ourselves and continuing and building bunkers and uniting when the rich, the Illuminati, will be doing exactly the same thing? They've prepared, I'm sure. So they're going to be on the same earth that we're going to be on, that's destroyed, but they're still going to be on it.
What dimension are they operating in?
You say third?
Third. Where are we going to be? Same space, different energy. I can take red light and blue light and green light and shine them all into the same space. And they'll all exist in the same space at the same time. And in fact, they make white light. We're 99.99% space. There are other things going through us any second. We think, oh, this is my space. No, there's not. There's cosmic rays and other beings from other dimensions and all sorts of things going through this space. When they talk about there's going to be a hell on earth and a heaven on earth, They're right. The hell on earth is here at the third dimension. The heaven on earth is the fifth dimension. But you can't get there if you're attached by any fears to the third dimension.
And that's the same outlook to have in terms of people that say, oh, how would you then protect your loved ones and your supplies from the people, the anarchists that are arriving on your property with a gun, if you don't allow yourself to go into a fear-based dense state?
Oh, you don't have to be fear. You can just sit there and go, sorry, you had your chance to plan, bang. And you shoot them. And you shoot them. Because from a fifth dimensional perspective, you understand all you're doing is releasing them from the third dimension.
We're setting them free.
Exactly.
Are there any ex-police?
So you won't attach any guilt to it.
This is what murderers think. I'm a hero.
Does anyone have any other questions relating to any aspect? Sorry, I didn't get to your question before.
So there was a bit of planning a few years ago with the whole Y2K thing about the crash millennium bug. That didn't happen. I started supplying stuff.
Yep.
Didn't happen. So how's this going to be different?
There really wasn't any evidence to support that other than the hype that was created around it. Okay? It was all media, and it was also instigated by the Illuminati as well. Okay? What's the difference between that and this? That's for you to decide, because all I'm doing is putting some data before you and saying to it, interpret it however you wish.
And where do you get this information from? That's another question.
There's links on the page. All of those links will take you to a lot of it.
So you don't channel this information from websites off the internet?
No, the factual information that I've given tonight comes from websites, comes from NASA, comes from various things. That's why I've given those links. Some of the historical data from the Egyptians, Sumerians, etc., you can find through any links to. There's numerous books being written about translation of Egyptian history. The Kolkin Bible, I've given you those lists as well. And the channeled information I've given to you, I've told has been channeled information that's come from me.
From where though?
From source. From source.
Part of it's channeled.
From God, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, source, yeah.
From the angels or just from God?
Well, source. Okay, understand with angels and higher beings, there's only oneness. So when people say that they channel Archangel Michael, for instance, or they channel Ashtar, or they channel whoever they say they're channeling, what they're actually doing is they're channeling a higher aspect of themselves, but they're not acknowledging it. They're keeping separation. One last question.
Final thing with them. Is it called? Are they going to play any role for anybody?
UFO is very important because there is going to be a UFO invasion which is totally from the Illuminati. When anarchy rules, they're going to try and bind everybody together against some other common enemy rather than themselves. So there will be a fake invasion. They already have the technology here to do that. However, the real extraterrestrials, the fifth dimensional beings, are sitting back, allowing things to unfold, and they will be taking some people off planet. That's already been arranged, and they will be coming back afterwards to assist in the rebuilding.
What shall I say to all my colleagues in the city?
I don't know. What do you want to say to them? Hang on. Shh. Okay. Here's the thing. What we do is we mention it to people. Okay? We mention it to people. If they're curious, they will ask more questions. If they want to stick their head in the sand, we just walk away.